In local news, police continue to search for leads regarding a rash of murders plaguing the county. At least a dozen deaths have been attributed to the individual dubbed the no-sleep killer, though authorities speculate the true number of victims may be significantly larger. If anyone has any information about this case, please call the toll-free law enforcement hotline at Daddy! From where he sat on the couch, John Morrison sighed, the nightly news blaring on the television in front of him. This was the third time Davy had called since he'd put the 8-year-old to bed a little over 2 hours ago. Heaving himself to his feet, John made his way across the room and walked up the staircase, the wooden steps complaining loudly under his bulk. At the top of the stairs, he flicked the switch for the overhead light and walked down the hallway to Davy's room. Cracking the door, John stuck his head through the opening. The light from the hall pushed into the room in a narrow beam, just enough that he could see where Davy sat wide-eyed in his bed, the covers tangled around his legs and feet. "What's up, sport?"
"There's a monster in my closet, Daddy,"
Davy whispered, fear audible in his voice. John smiled to himself. This had become something of a habit with Davy lately, particularly flaring up whenever he got back from spending a weekend at his mother's house. John didn't know what his bitch of an ex-wife did to put poor Davy into such a state, but he felt for the kid. "A monster in your closet? Didn't I check in there before we said goodnight?"
"He wasn't there then, Daddy. He snuck in through the window."
Davy's voice trembled. Pushing the rest of the way into the room, John walked over to the window. Giving it a quick inspection, he found it was closed and locked as always. "You sure you weren't just having a bad dream?"
"I was having a bad dream, but then I woke up. That's when I saw the monster climbing in, and when I yelled, he hid."
John sighed. He was going to have to talk to Miranda about this. Whatever she was doing to the poor kid was obviously giving his nerves a beating. "Okay, sport, I believe you. But don't you worry. Your daddy knows how to handle monsters in the closet. They're hiding in there to scare you, right? So you just have to scare them back. Surprise them when they don't expect it. If you do that, they disappear. Want me to show you?" Davy nodded, clutching the covers up to his face so only his eyebrows peeked over the top. John moved to the closet.
Be careful, Daddy,"
Davy whispered. John put a finger to his lips. "You have to be quiet, son, or the monsters will know you're sneaking up on them." Slowly, he extended his hand toward the knob, lightly grasping it. He paused for a moment, cocking his head as if listening for sounds within, before twisting the knob and violently wrenching the door open with a yell. Ha! The opening was dark. So dark, in fact, John thought wryly that even if there were a monster in there, he wouldn't be able to tell. And suddenly, impossibly, the darkness moved. Out of the blackness flashed a whisper of silver, reflecting the hallway light ever so slightly. John felt a sharp tug at his throat. He took a step back, confused, one hand reflexively reaching for his neck. Something there was hot and wet, and when he removed his hand, he could tell from the light of the doorway that his fingers were stained bright red. He barely had time to consider this thought before he found himself flat on his back in the middle of the floor. John had both hands against his throat now, and could feel spurts of warm blood pulsing between his fingers. Black dots swarmed his vision, and it took him a moment to realize that the tremendous pounding in his ears was the sound of his own beating heart. A dark shape stepped across him toward the bed, where John could hear Davy screaming. He reached out, clutching desperately at the figure, but his hands were too weak. The shape effortlessly pulled away. A wordless croak of anguish escaped him as Davy's terrified cries were abruptly silenced. For several moments, John lay sobbing, his life slipping through his hands when he felt a presence standing over him. Opening his eyes, John saw the face of the thing from the closet illuminated from the light by the hall. Whatever it was couldn't have been human. Scraggly black hair framed a face so pale it was practically white. The thing's mouth had been brutally mutilated at the corners, carved into a permanent hideous smile. And his eyes, the eyes that watched John as his life flowed through his fingertips, were unblinking and dark, black as the pits of hell. John reached to the figure in one last silent entreaty. As the remains of his vision fled, he could barely see the shape raise a single finger to its scarred lips. The same motion as John had made to Davy bare minutes ago. Slipping into darkness, John could just make out the words the thing whispered to him, his consciousness falling away into uncharted depths. Shh. Go to sleep, the killer purred. Before. The water was dark. Jeff could see light as he swam upward desperately, his lungs burning. Just before he broke the surface, he looked down. Jeff's alarm went off without warning. His hand reached out to slap the switch and kill the annoying buzzing, but aside from that, he didn't move. Instead, simply staring up at the fan rotating lazily on the ceiling. Lately, the dream had been coming more and more regularly and with greater intensity. After maybe 10 minutes, the sounds of the house's other occupants reached his ears, but even these failed to stir him. His mother's voice was muffled through the door.
Lou, could you check on Jeff and make sure he's up?
Yeah, sure, Mom. A few moments later, he heard the click of his door being opened as Lou stuck his head in. Hey, bro, you up? Go away, asshole. Even though he wasn't looking at him, Jeff could hear the grin in Lou's voice. You kiss your mother with that mouth? Yeah. Jeff turned his head to face Lou. Your mom too, dork. Despite himself, he felt his face break out in a smile of his own, something his younger brother always managed to do. Lou plopped down on the bed beside him. Come on, man, big day. New school and everything. Jeff groaned. Ugh, don't remind me. A whole new group of insecure clowns to take shit from. Just kill me now. Hey, on the bright side, it's Friday already. And come on, you're looking at it all wrong. You see, the way I figure it, you've been missing out on a prime opportunity. That skin of yours? I guarantee you could have all the super hot goth chicks throwing themselves at you with little effort. I have on good authority those girls are crazy. In all the right ways. The good mood that had been threatening to break through the black cloud surrounding Jeff's mind was washed away in an instant, taking his smile with it. Don't, Lou. Lou gave him a pained look. Aw, Jeff, you know I didn't mean it like that. Don't. Jeff glared up at his brother. I'm up. Get out. Lou's shoulders slumped. Yeah, okay, I'll see you downstairs. He slunk unhappily back into the hallway, closing the door quietly behind him. Jeff remained in bed for another moment before sighing and rolling to his feet. He picked through the room, still filled with half-open cardboard boxes, and made his way to the bathroom down the hall. Turning on the sink, he stared at the mirror. Only a concerted effort kept him from shattering the hateful thing. From the other side of the glass, an unnaturally white-skinned creature looked back at him, all pale hair and light eyes. Some days, it was hard to believe the reflection belonged to him. Lou was one of the only people who saw past Jeff's outward appearance, the appearance that had been the source of so much hate and bullying in their last town. The bullying that had indirectly driven the move across the state. It wasn't Lou's fault, and Jeff knew he hadn't meant anything by his comment. But that didn't lessen the sting. Well, I think you're beautiful. Jeff smiled sadly. The voice in his head wasn't there. Not really. I know you do, Katie. But you're gone. He returned to his room and rummaged through one of the boxes until he found what he was looking for. He perched on the bed and inhaled deeply. The plain white sweatshirt still smelled like her. For several long moments, Jeff sat, steeling himself for the day to come, and remembered a better time, a time when he was happy. When Jeff finally made his way to the kitchen, Lou was sitting at the table finishing off a bowl of cereal. Their father was across from him reading the morning newspaper and glanced up as Jeff entered. "Good morning, Jeff. Don't we look chipper today?" Jeff's only reply was a grunt as he pulled a chair out and fell heavily into it. His father's clenched teeth could almost be confused with a smile. "Keep up the attitude, smart guy." Jeff opened his mouth to reply, but his mother moved from the stove and slid a plate of eggs across the table towards him with a warning look. Jeff glowered but stayed silent, choosing to simply shovel food into his mouth. His father turned back to the sports section, and for a brief time, the family sat together in relative peace. A knock prompted Jeff's mother to get to her feet and answer the door. From where he sat, Jeff couldn't make out the words being said, but could tell from the voice that the person at the door was a woman, probably a neighbor coming by to introduce herself. "Tell her to go away, Mom. Tell her to mind her own business and leave us alone." The sound of shared laughter from the doorway told him those were probably not the sentiments his mother was passing on. After a few more minutes of small talk, the door shut, and his mother returned to the kitchen.
Well, that was Barbara Randall from across the street. She just came by to introduce herself and invite all of us to her son Billy's birthday party tomorrow.
Jeff sneered at his plate. "Yeah, that's happening." His father slapped the folded newspaper down onto the table, causing a small explosion of scrambled eggs to jump into the air. "All right, that's it." Jeff threw back his chair and went to stand as his father rose to his feet.
"Stop!"
At the crack of her voice, both Jeff and his father froze. Jeff's mother stood, hands raised as if forcing them apart. Her lower lip trembled, but her eyes were ablaze with anger and determination as she looked at each of them in turn.
"Sit down, both of you."
Without breaking eye contact, Jeff and his father slowly returned to their seats. After a moment, Jeff's mother sat down as well. Lou remained motionless, his downward gaze intensely studying the checkered pattern of the tablecloth. Primly taking her napkin to wipe the corners of her eyes, Jeff's mother continued to speak, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened.
"Now then, we will be going to the birthday party tomorrow afternoon." She pointedly looked at Jeff. "All of us. We will have a good time. We will show our neighbors what a normal, fun-loving family we are. We will make friends." She sniffed. "And that's final. Clear?"
"Yes, Mom," Lou mumbled, still not raising his head. "Yes, dear," Jeff's father replied. She turned to Jeff.
"Jeffrey?"
Jeff sneered. "Family? Families have each other's backs. Families believe in each other. This is no family." Abruptly, he stood and turned, practically throwing his chair under the table before storming towards the front door. His father stood to get up. "Now, listen here."
"No,"
Jeff's mom snapped.
"Let him go, Peter. Please."
Jeff left the house, pausing only to grab his jacket where it hung by the entrance and slammed the door behind him. He raged down the sidewalk, not really thinking about where he was going, just knowing he had to get away. After a couple blocks, he came to a bench and collapsed onto it, head in hands. Throughout everything that had happened, Jeff and his father hadn't yet come to blows, but it was a close thing. The shouting matches were occurring more regularly, and each time, Jeff felt himself wanting to lash out just a little more. His thoughts turned back to the day that had started it all. Katie. Her beautiful face now even paler than his. Her body motionless in the tub. The water crimson. lit by black candles burning low and illuminating the odd inscriptions painted upon the walls in her own blood. Jeff had been the one to find her. There'd been no note.
You shouldn't get so mad at them. It's not their fault.
I know, Jeff replied quietly. It isn't. You're right. You're always right. It's just... I miss you. So much.
It's okay, Jeff. You're allowed to miss me. But I wish you wouldn't feel bad. I'm happy now. Happier than I ever was in life. I don't want you to be so sad. I wish you'd smile more.
I should have been stronger. I should have stood up for you. Jeff's voice was a whisper. You should have been happy with me.
You were the one bright spot in my life, Jeff. You being stronger wouldn't have made a difference. My decision was my own. I chose to go to sleep. It's so much better here, you'll see. Someday, everyone will.
The voice in his head fell quiet. For some time, Jeff simply drifted, lost in thoughts of the girl he still loved. Hey. Jeff looked up to find Lou standing next to him. Without invitation, his brother sat down on the bench. After a few moments, Lou broke the silence.
Talking to Katie?
Jeff grimaced. Yeah.
It's cool, man. I miss her too. She was a great girl.
Jeff didn't reply.
Jeff, for what it's worth, I know you didn't have anything to do with what happened. I know you loved her. You wouldn't have helped her take her own life, no matter what anybody says.
Jeff sighed. Her parents didn't think so. Or that detective. Dad either. He blames me for everything. Her dying. All the bullshit with the cops afterwards, us having to move to get away from the media shitstorm? The hell? He probably thinks it's my fault those assholes drove her to it. Maybe it's right. Maybe if Katie had had nothing to do with me, they would have left her alone.
Seriously?
Lou looked at him with a cocked eyebrow.
That's ridiculous. All of it. Well, maybe not her parents and the cops, but the rest of it. Dad's having a hard time processing everything that's been happening, and you acting like a dick just sets him off. He loves you, but he's scared. You two are so much alike, it's ridiculous. And the other part, guys like them, they don't need an excuse to bully people, Jeff. They see people who are unique or different, and their own insecurities just take over. Katie was awesome, but she had her quirks too. All those pagan rituals, how she cut off her hair and wore that wig around. Man, they would have given her a hard time whether you were with her or not. Hell, you being around probably deflected some of the stuff off of her onto you. Gave the assholes another person to target.
Jeff sighed. You might be right. Doesn't make it easier. She's still gone. Lou nodded. Yeah, I know, bro. They sat together in companionable silence.
You know I didn't mean anything by what I said this morning? Katie wasn't crazy. Definitely weird, but not crazy.
Jeff shook his head. I know, man. I wasn't even mad at you, not really. It's just, the thoughts in my head, with everything going on, all the stuff that's been happening, they get so loud it's all I can do to function. I've been getting these weird feelings lately, man. This anger. Since she died, I keep having this dream that I'm drowning. More and more, it seems like it's bleeding over into my real life. Sometimes it's like I'm losing myself in the pain and the rage, that something else has taken over. Jeff stared ahead, eyes fixed on nothing. I hear her, you know. In my mind. I hear her voice clearly, as if she were standing next to me. Lou smiled gently.
What does she say?
Mostly that I should stop being so hard on myself, stop blaming everybody. That I should smile more, be happy. Lou laughed.
Well, bro, it sounds like disembodied Katie voice gives pretty good advice. And that she's still smarter than you.
Jeff felt the corners of his mouth twitch ever so slightly. Yeah. It isn't hard, huh?
You got that right,
Lou grinned.
Come on, how about we start walking to the bus stop? We should be able to make it. Won't make a great impression if we're late to our first day of school.
Yeah, because I care about that. Lou glared and Jeff rolled his eyes. All right, fine, Mom, but I'm not going back home to get my stuff.
Got you covered. Lou passed Jeff his backpack and reached out a hand to help pull Jeff to his feet. Together, they started walking back down the street towards the bus stop.
Honestly, Jeff mused,
Katie was a little crazy.
That thing with the wig? Gosh, I was so pissed at her.
Her hair was so pretty, but she insisted on wearing that ugly black thing.
He paused. You know, I still have it. The wig, I mean. And a couple more of her things. I pulled them from her locker before her folks got there to clean it out. Figured I'd want something to remember her by. Lou gave him a look.
Huh. Maybe Katie wasn't the only one that was a little crazy in your guys' relationship.
Jeff chuckled. Whatever. Doing crazy things is normal when you're in love. Not that you know about it.
You got me there, bro.
Lou grinned mischievously.
Just don't let me catch you dressing up a mannequin to make out with or something.
Don't worry, Jeff smiled back. I won't let you catch me.
Good. Now, what the heck is this?
They were half a block from the bus stop. As they drew closer, it became apparent that the smaller boy surrounded by three larger ones was having a bad day. Two of the larger boys, one whip-thin and angular, the other huge and fat, held the smaller one's arms out to his sides to help keep him upright. The third boy punched him, working in a slap to the head between close-fisted blows to his ribs and belly. Jeff laid a hand on Lou's shoulder. Come on, man, do we really want to get involved here? Lou glared at Jeff, pulling his arm away.
Don't be a jerk, Jeff. Wouldn't you want someone to step in if that was you getting the shit beat out of? Hey!
Lou shouted, enraged.
What the hell are you doing?
The one doing the punching paused briefly and swept his gaze over Lou and Jeff. His face a mask void of surprise or concern before turning back to the captive. Cocking his leg, he delivered a hard upward kick to the boy's groin. At a nod, the two holding the victim's arms let him fall to the sidewalk in a moaning heap. The assailant crouched close to the boy's ear, whispering something Jeff and Lou couldn't hear. The boy nodded his head violently in agreement, tears and snot dripping down to mark the pavement. Apparently satisfied, the boy stood, and with a final kick to the victim's ribs growled, "Glad that's all cleared up. Get out of here, you little bitch." The boy started pulling himself down the sidewalk on his hands and knees before attempting to stand and stumbling off. Jeff, Lou, and the others watched until he turned the corner and was lost to view. The lead bully, now flanked by his cohorts, turned to the brothers, his face breaking into a smile. "Well, well, 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 fresh meat." The boy stepped forward. "Now I'm sure I'd remember a freak like Whitey there, so you two must be new. Allow me to introduce myself and my friends. This is Keith." He gestured to the skinnier of his two sidekicks. Keith smiled with his teeth, looking like a starved rabid wolf. "And he's Troy." The enormous boy slowly nodded his head, the fat under his chin quivering at the motion. "And I am Randy. Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there's a small fee for bus fare, if you catch my drift. Those that can't pay, well, you saw what happens to them. So what do you say?" Lou took a step closer to Randy. "I say you're welcome to try and take it." Randy's eyes glinted menacingly. "I see. And here I had hoped you'd be more cooperative. Keith?" At his name, the skeletal boy reached into his pocket and removed a thin-bladed knife, snapping it open and placing the handle into Randy's outstretched palm. In a flash, he stepped up and pressed the blade to Lou's throat as Jeff's brother started to raise his hands in surprise. "Ah, hold still, hero." Lou froze. With his other hand, Randy fished in Lou's pocket and removed his wallet. "No." Jeff heard the words in his head clear as a bell. It was the same voice he heard in the quiet times he talked to Katie, but different. Violent and enraged. A furious heat pulsed from deep within his core and spread down his limbs, his muscles singing with foreign power. "No!" As Jeff watched, Randy slipped Lou's wallet into his own pocket. His hand free, the bully slugged Lou in the gut, causing him to gasp and crumple to the ground. "Should have done it the easy way, friend. I'll be back for you in a minute." Randy turned his gaze to Jeff. "And what about you, Powder?" "Not again. Never again." Jeff stepped forward, his body humming like a live wire. "Listen here, you little punk. Give back my brother's wallet and fuck off. Or else." The words were his own, but somehow felt fuller. For a beat, Randy looked at him, unable to believe what he was hearing. As one, he and his goons burst into laughter. "Oh, really? And what are you gonna do?" The words were barely out of Randy's mouth when Jeff's closed fist hit him squarely in the face. With a grim sense of satisfaction, Jeff felt the cartilage of Randy's nose snap with a sickening crack. He stepped forward, grabbing below Randy's knife hand in a vice-like grip, the bones and tendons in the wrist popping like bent springs. Randy screamed as Jeff plucked the knife from his hand. Overcoming his momentary shock, Keith rushed forward. Contemptuously, Jeff dropped Randy's arm, and the bully fell to the ground in a whimpering heap. With a face locked in a wolfish snarl, Keith lashed out, his punches a blur, but Jeff easily slipped past the blows. He drew his arm back and with one precise, brutal motion, stabbed the thin boy in the arm, the knife blade easily sliding through the muscle. Now it was Keith's turn to collapse to the ground screaming, cradling his bleeding limb. Without warning, Jeff felt himself lifted off the ground in a crushing bear hug, the sudden attack causing him to drop the knife. Though he looked the least intelligent of the three, Troy had used the confusion of Jeff's fight with Keith to sneak behind him and wait for the moment to strike. Spots started to dance in Jeff's eyes as the boy bore down ever tighter. Jeff struggled, but his position offered him no leverage to try and break the hold. Finally, he wrenched his arms apart with all the force his newfound strength could muster, just enough for him to slip through Troy's grip. Twisting his torso, Jeff threw a vicious elbow into the soft spot below Troy's ribs. The larger boy dropped to his knees, his breath coming in desperate, shallow gasps before emptying the contents of his stomach onto the sidewalk. With that, it was over. Jeff stood unharmed, surrounded by the gang, two boys whimpering and crying in their own blood, the third continuing to dry heave over a sickly puddle of vomit. Jeff's gaze fell on the knife he had dropped. Bending over, he picked it up, his attention turning to the huddled masses of the bullies. It would be so easy to end this now. Make sure they never hurt anyone ever again. Do it! Do it! Jeff! He shook his head to clear it, and could feel the strange strength slip away, the internal voice falling silent. From where he fell, Lou had managed to raise himself up onto his arms to watch the fight, his face locked in disbelief. Jeff shuddered and folded the knife into his jacket pocket before walking over and helping his brother to his feet. "Jeff, how did—" Jeff shook his head, saying nothing. Lou paused for a moment, composing himself. "Okay, come on, we have to get out of here. The bus will be coming, and no way will anyone believe these guys were the ones who started it. Neither of us have a mark compared to them." Jeff nodded in agreement, and the boys took off running. Sure enough, The bus turned onto the street as they reached the corner. Looking back, Jeff saw the doors open and the driver rushed to where Randy and the others still lay sprawled. Jeff turned and caught up with Lou. The boys arrived at school just as the final bell was ringing. Lou pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. "Okay, Mom gave this to me before I left. It's got our assigned homerooms on it." Jeff glanced at the paper as his brother went on. Jeff, we can't tell anyone about what happened. If we're lucky, Randy and his goons will be too embarrassed to admit they got beat up by 2 guys. Even luckier if nobody else saw us." Jeff nodded in agreement as Lou continued. "Hell, 1 guy really. All I did was lay there. Do you really have no idea how you did it?" Jeff shrugged, speaking for the first time since before the fight. "None. I just had this feeling come over me. It felt like I could lift a truck." Lou shook his head in amazement. "I would have never believed it if I hadn't seen it, Jeff." He gripped his brother's sleeve as he turned to go. "I don't know how to explain what happened, but something just doesn't seem right about it. At the end there, when they were all laid out and you were standing over them, you had this look. It was terrifying. I've never seen that expression on your face before, not even after you found Katie. It was like you were someone else. And your eyes, bro." He shuddered. "I know it's impossible, but I'd swear they were black. Pitch black like a shark." Jeff forced a laugh. "That's crazy, man. Sure you didn't hit your head back there? Come on. I'll meet you here after school. We should probably avoid the bus for a couple of days and walk home. Later." Lou frowned at Jeff as he walked down the hall. Feeling his brother's gaze on his back, it was all Jeff could do to avoid breaking into a run. Turning the corner at the end of the hallway, he was relieved to find the door to a restroom and shoved his way inside. Locking himself in the stall at the end of the row, he collapsed, trembling. Lou was right. There had been something wrong about the fight, something unnatural. Even discounting Lou's comment about his eyes, and Jeff had no idea what to make of that, there was still the matter of the incredible strength he had temporarily possessed. Jeff had heard stories of adrenaline allowing people to perform amazing physical feats in times of crisis, but somehow he knew that wasn't what had happened. And as for the look Lou had seen on Jeff's face as he loomed over the defeated bullies, Jeff remembered exactly what he was feeling at that moment. An intense desire to rip and cut, to hurt, to kill. What scared Jeff the most was that it was the same feeling that had slowly been growing as the shouting matches with his father increased. Somehow, thinking about wrapping his fingers around his father's neck, or slowly sliding his knife into Randy's throat, made him feel happy, an emotion he'd lost since before Katie died. For a while, this call to violence had only been present when he was angry, but lately it had become omnipresent, changing in intensity but always there, throbbing, like an itch he didn't dare scratch. Until this morning with the bullies. What the hell is wrong with me? Katie, what the hell is wrong with me? The internal voice that had become so familiar to him over the past few months was ominously silent. Eventually, Jeff regained enough emotional control to leave the restroom. He made his way to class and briefly apologized to the teacher for being late, explaining that he'd had some trouble finding the room. The rest of the day went by in a monotone shade of gray. Jeff avoided talking to any other students, refrained from participating in any of his classes, and ignored the stares and whispered comments his complexion always brought. Soon, he found himself waiting by the front entrance as Lou walked up to join him. The brothers traveled home in silence, neither wanting to bring up the strange events of the morning. Letting themselves into the house, Jeff ignored the shouted hello from his mother, instead going straight upstairs to his room and slamming the door closed, dropping his jacket on the floor and himself onto the bed. The water was dark. Jeff could see light as he swam upward, desperately, his lungs burning. Just before he broke the surface, he looked down, Below, he saw Katie. Her face frozen in a horrific doll smile, her eyes black as the grave. The doorbell startled him awake. Through the bedroom door, Jeff could hear low, muffled conversation.
"Jeff, Lou," his mother called. "Could you boys come down here for a minute?"
Her voice was strained. Grumbling a curse under his breath, Jeff rolled to his feet and stumbled from the room, avoiding the cardboard boxes. Halfway down the stairs, he paused. His mother was at the open front door, quietly speaking with the 2 police officers standing just outside. "Mom, what's going on?" One of the officers lifted a hand. "Please, Mrs. Woods, allow me. It's Jeff, right?" "Well, Jeff, we had 3 boys show up in the ER today with everything from broken noses and cracked sternums to stab wounds. They'd been in quite a scuffle." He chuckled. "Their bus drivers noticed 2 individuals fleeing the scene and was able to provide a pretty detailed idea of what they looked like. Now, it took a little footwork to check with some of the neighbors to see if they knew anyone that matched the descriptions, but I'll give you 3 guesses where they eventually led us. First 2 don't count."
"What? That's bullshit. Randy and those other 2 pricks were the ones who attacked us."
"I see, Bob. I told you that's what it was." The second officer laughed. On one hand, we've got the testimony of Randall McQuaid, honor student and son of Deputy Police Chief Charles McQuaid. And on the other," he flipped through some papers on the clipboard he held, "Jeffrey Woods, 17, a former resident of Arthur's Wake." He looked up at Jeff. "You know, I've got a couple police academy buddies over in the Wake. After we got an ID, I gave them a call. You know what I found?" "Course you do. A history of petty crime, minor assault, and... oh yeah," he smirked. "Person of interest in the death of one Katie Robinson, 16. So, Jeff, tell me again what happened." Jeff was at a loss for words, his mouth hung open aimlessly. Everything they'd said was true. There was no way they'd believe anything he had to say without any evidence. At this point, it was just his word against Randy's. He shook his head in frustration. The officer smiled. "That's what I thought. Come here, kid." Jeff's eyes narrowed.
"These cops are the same ones as before. They tried to blame you for my death. Now they're trying to pin this on you."
Jeff's hands clenched in the fist as heat began to rise deep in his chest. The familiar call to violence flared, insistent.
Show them what we can do."
Jeff took a step towards the officers, whose eyes widened slightly, their hands hovering towards their holstered guns.
"Wait!"
Surprised, Jeff turned to find Lou at the top of the stairs, the voice in his head falling silent, and the alien strength slipping away. The siren song calling to violence dropped away to background noise as Lou slowly stepped down until he was standing next to Jeff.
"Lou,"
Jeff whispered through clenched teeth.
"What the hell are you doing?"
Lou faced forward, ignoring his brother.
"It was me, officers. I beat up those other kids."
The second officer paused, still looking at Jeff. "Now, son, that's a very serious claim. You sure you want to make it?"
"Sure, it's the truth. Jeff just tried to hold me back. Got the knife right here."
He carefully reached down, setting the closed blade on the step at his feet. The officer pursed his lips in thought. His partner leaned in, speaking quietly. "Steve, Randy, and his friends didn't specify who assaulted him. If this kid says he's the one and he's got the weapon, it's going to be tough to pull them both in without more details." Coming to a decision, the officer nodded his head slowly. "Well, all right then, Mr. Woods. I'm not sure I quite believe you, considering your brother's history, but we'll see if a couple nights in the juvenile holding facility don't change your story." He turned back to Jeff's mother as his partner retrieved the knife and handcuffed Lou, leading him out to the squad car. "Mrs. Woods, just so you know, Judge Creed will sometimes release juvenile delinquents to their parents. However, due to the violent nature of this crime, Lou may end up having to remain at the center at least until his initial hearing. In either case, it will be Monday before anyone from the court contacts you about what items you can bring to him during his stay. They'll make sure he's comfortable until then. Jeff's mother nodded, her face numb with shock. Of course, officer, I understand. Thank you, ma'am. And you. The policeman pointed at Jeff. Just stay out of trouble, young man. He left, Jeff's mother shutting the door behind him and resting her head against it. Jeff could see tears rolling down her cheeks, her body racked with silent sobs. He took a step down the stairs toward her. Mom. She turned to him, her face struggling to compose itself. Go to your room, Jeffrey. But I said go to your room! He retreated up the stairs, unable and unwilling to press the issue. What could he say that she would believe anyway? That he'd been the one to beat up Randy and his friends? Such a confession wouldn't solve anything and might only make matters worse. Give her one more reason to hate him. Why had Lou taken the fall for him? He slammed the door of his bedroom in frustration and threw himself on his bed. After a few minutes of silent stewing, his gaze fell on a piece of paper resting in the center of the room. Retrieving it, he read the hastily scribbled words in Lou's handwriting. Jeff, I gotta make this quick. Cop car out front. You'll say I'm an idiot, but let me do this for you. It was my idea to get involved with those assholes anyway. All the shit you went through with Katie, you don't need more police interest. Thanks for leaving the knife in your coat. Love you, bro. A hollow pit opened in Jeff's gut as he read the note a second time, then a third, and finally balling it up and throwing the crumpled paper into the trash can by the door. His brother, his best friend, had sacrificed himself for Jeff, and Jeff wasn't man enough to try to stop him. Tears filling his eyes, he blindly groped through the box and retrieved Katie's sweatshirt, curling up on the bed with it pressed to his face. He was dimly aware of his father arriving home from work some hours later, his raised voice making his anger clear to Jeff in his closed room. A small part of Jeff hoped that the man would come upstairs, kick in the door, and beat him bloody. Felt it was all he deserved and more. But it wasn't to be. For an indeterminate time, Jeff simply wallowed in grief and pain. The accumulated losses of Katie, his old home, and now his brother simply too much to bear. At last, he slept. The water was dark. Jeff could see light as he swam upward, desperately, his lungs burning. Just before he broke the surface, he looked down. Below, he saw Katie, her face frozen in a horrific doll smile, her eyes black as the grave, reaching for his ankles with clawed fingers. He kicked frantically, knowing that if she caught him, he would never reach the surface. Jeff was awoken by sunlight streaming onto his face. He squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes from the window where his mother stood, pulling the curtains open, all emotional traces of the previous night masked. Come on, Jeffrey. It's almost 3 in the afternoon, and we've got things to do. Mom, what? Billy Randall's party. We're walking over in 10 minutes. Jeff scowled. Mom, you're joking, right? You can't expect me to... Jeffrey, this is not a discussion. We are all going. Now get dressed. Although her voice was calm, her eyes brimmed with unspent tears. Jeff could see she was barely holding on. Attending this party, a chance to pretend to be normal after everything they'd been through, was the only thing keeping her from sliding over the edge. Fine, he grumbled. Getting out of bed, he threw on jeans and a plain t-shirt. Heading downstairs, he met his father at the front door. Good morning, sunshine. Glad to see you dressed up for the party. His father's usual mocking tone was tinged by barely restrained rage, daring Jeff to start off. Jeff scowled but remained silent. His mother bustled up.
Never mind, no time to change. Let's go meet some new friends.
She herded Jeff and his father out the door. Walking across the street, Jeff inwardly laughed that a casual observer might mistake them for a normal happy family. But at the thought of Lou, locked away and doing God knew what, Jeff felt his already cloudy mood blacken even further. He stepped onto the porch with his parents, and Jeff's mother rang the bell. A few clacking steps preceded the door opening to reveal Barbara Randall.
Margaret, Peter, so glad you can make it. And you must be Jeff. Oh, but where is your other son? Didn't you say you had two?
Jeff's mother returned a strange smile.
Lou had a few unexpected things come up and won't be able to make it today, unfortunately.
Barbara laughed.
Of course, we'll just have to meet him another time. Jeff, Billy and his friends are in the backyard. You can head out there if you want to get away from the stuffy adults.
Sure, Jeff grunted.
Now, Margaret, let me introduce you to everyone. There are so many people you simply have to meet.
She let his parents off. Left on his own, Jeff wandered. Based on the furniture and decor, the Randalls had money. Jeff's mom would love that. With nothing better to do, he made his way to the backyard, taking in the scene as he exited through the sliding door. There were maybe a dozen kids already there, small knots scattered throughout the yard talking quietly. One group in the far corner had suspicious wisps of smoke curling up from the center of their huddle as they took turns shooting furtive glances back at the house. One boy sat alone at the picnic table in the center of the yard, ignored by the others. To Jeff's surprise, he recognized him. The last time Jeff had seen the boy, he'd been getting beat up. Jeff walked up to him. Hey. The boy jerked, turning to face Jeff in surprise. He looked nervous.
Hey.
Something clicked in Jeff's head. You must be Billy, right? He nodded hesitantly. Jeff smiled. Mind if I sit down? Billy nodded again, slightly, his eyes wary. Jeff sat. After a moment, Billy spoke up.
Do I know you? You look familiar, but I don't.
I'm Jeff. We never officially met. My brother and I interrupted an ass-kicking you were getting yesterday. Billy looked down, embarrassed.
Oh, that. I really appreciate what the two of you did. I'm sorry I didn't stick around, but, you know.
I get it, man. Don't mention it. Anybody would have stepped in.
No, they wouldn't have.
Billy shook his head. He indicated to the groups around the yard.
None of them would have done anything. They would have just let it happen, or joined in themselves. They aren't my friends. They're just here because my parents are the richest people in town and their parents made them come to suck up.
A thought struck Jeff. You know, you actually have my brother Lou to thank for helping us out. He's the one that insisted. Billy nodded.
Please pass my gratitude along. I'll be sure to tell him myself when I see him.
Well, that might be a bit of a problem, seeing as he's currently being held at juvie. Funny thing, Randy and his friends are claiming they were the ones that attacked. And with me and Lou being new in town, and with no one to back up our side of the story... He trailed off.
I see.
Billy lowered his head for a moment, pensive, before turning to look at Jeff.
Yes, I think I can help you. My father knows people. I'm sure I can get him to straighten everything out.
It felt as if a huge weight was lifted off of Jeff's shoulders. Oh, I would. You have no idea how much that would mean to me, Billy. The boy smiled.
It's literally the least I can do. It doesn't seem right that someone else should suffer for trying to help me.
Jeff frowned. Why do those jerks have it in for you anyway?
I'm not sure. Probably because my parents have money. Troy wouldn't be so sad, except his dad works for Randy's at the police station. He's been following Randy for years. Keith is just a lowlife. I think Randy keeps him around because it makes him feel more badass. And Randy, he wasn't always the way he is. His mom died a few years ago, and everyone knows his dad hits the bottle pretty hard. Randy started to come into school with some pretty bad cuts and bruises, but no one would say anything because his dad is the police chief. It wasn't long before he started his bus fare collections. That's no excuse. I've got plenty of problems. You don't see me taking them out on people smaller than me. What can I say? Maybe they're just assholes. Billy smiled and Jeff laughed. The boys continued talking for several minutes, exchanging stories. Jeff found himself warming to Billy Randall. This was someone he could be friends with, even more so if Billy managed to help get Lou out of trouble. Despite everything that had been happening, the thought that his violent urges might be dispelled, that things might just turn out all right, threatened to disrupt Jeff's general depression. So then there was the time my dad was going to take us. Oh no. Billy froze, and Jeff followed his gaze to the door leading back into the house. Standing on the verge of passing into the yard were Randy and his cronies. Any hope Jeff might have had that he wouldn't be spotted was dashed when he realized all three were staring directly at him. As he watched, Keith leaned over and whispered something into Randy's ear. The lead bully nodded his head slowly. Somewhere inside, Jeff felt a thrill of satisfaction. Randy's wrist was in a cast, and the broken nose had given him a pair of black eyes that had made him look like a raccoon. The trio approached where Jeff and Billy sat. Oh, gosh, my mom must have invited their families. It's fine, they won't try anything here. As they got closer, Jeff could tell that Troy moved stiffly, probably from having his chest wrapped, and saw under Keith's shirt where his upper arm was bandaged. Powder, fancy seeing you here. Randy sat down on the bench next to Jeff with Keith and Troy standing in front of them. I see you met my friend Billy. My name's Jeff. What do you want? Randy smiled. You know, Whitey. Sorry, Jeff. He sneered. I was hoping you'd be here today. The way I see it, we have some unfinished business, you and I. So, you've got two options. The easy way, you walk with us out the back gate over there and take your lumps. Or the hard way. Keith here pulls out my dad's service pistol from his backpack and things get messy. He grinned. Part of me hopes you choose the hard way. Jeff shook his head. You guys are crazy, he hissed before pausing to think for a moment, looking at Billy. Fine, I'll come. Just don't hurt anyone. Randy smiled. Good choice. He turned to Billy. And not a word from you, birthday bitch, unless you want the same. All right, let's go. Jeff followed Randy out the gate with Keith and Troy flanking him on either side. They crossed a field into a wooded area, walking through the trees for a time before they stopped in a small clearing. Randy looked around. This'll do. You ready? Jeff held up his hands. Randy, come on, I don't want to fight. Yes, you do! Yes, you do! Jeff shook his head to try to quiet the voice suddenly present inside him, to dissipate the growing, screaming urge to rip the bullies apart. I kicked your asses and now my brother's in juvie. The way I see it, we're even. Randy smiled. I don't get even. I win. And who said anything about fighting? Jeff turned just in time to see a bottle descending as Keith swung it at his head. An explosion of pain was followed by sudden blackness. The water was dark. Jeff could see light as he swam upward desperately, his lungs burning. Just before he broke the surface, he looked down. Below, he saw Katie, her face frozen in a horrific doll's smile, her eyes black as the grave, reaching for his ankles with clawed fingers. He kicked frantically, knowing that if she caught him, he would never reach the surface. He felt her hand tighten about his ankle, wrenching him away from the life-giving air. Jeff screamed with the last of his breath, knowing that there was no way he could break free as she pulled him, struggling deeper and deeper into the inky blackness below.
Randy and his cronies argued to the side of where Jeff's body lay.
Are you kidding me? Keith, I thought we were just going to scare him, roughen him up a little.
Troy's voice was shaken.
You might have killed him, man.
Stop being such a bitch, Troy. He challenged us. We have to make an example. Back me up here, Randy. Randy looked sick.
Is he breathing?
Keith sneered.
You worried? Come on, man, of course he is. I'm not going to kill him. This is our chance to make sure no one screws with us from here on out. None of those little fucks at the party will say anything, and if they do, we'll do the same to them.
Keith had unscrewed the top of the bottle he'd hit Jeff with and was pouring the contents over Jeff's still form. Troy grabbed his arm, roughly pulling him away.
Keith, what are you doing? Is that alcohol? What are you going to do, burn him? That's way too far. I can't let you do that, man.
Keith rolled his eyes.
I'm not actually going to set him on fire, you pussy. I just have to make him think I might. Just like we weren't going to shoot him with your dad's pistol, Randy. Damn thing isn't even loaded.
Randy sighed.
Okay, we'll do it your way. But no flicking the lighter. I don't want to accidentally let it slip.
Keith laughed.
Asshole, fine. Now let's wake Sleeping Beauty. Hey, how funny would it be if he pisses himself?
The three turned to where they had left Jeff and stopped, dumbstruck.
Where the hell did he go?
Randy whispered. Unseen, a pale hand snaked from behind Troy and closed on the large boy's throat.
Hooah!
Troy pried where the hand tightened on his windpipe, nails drawing blood as he desperately tore at the digits digging into the soft meat of his neck. With a sickening gurgle, his eyes rolled back in his head and he fell to the ground. Keith and Randy watched, mouths agape, as the thing that was once Jeffrey Woods stood over the body, gazing at it almost tenderly. Suddenly, it turned its attention to the two remaining boys, smiling wickedly at the slow trickle of urine running down the leg of Keith's jeans. Sharing a glance, the two turned and fled back the way they came. With a laugh, the killer took chase. Randy sprinted through the trees behind Keith, trying to keep up with the slim boy as best he could. A fallen branch caught his shin and he tripped, falling heavily to the leaf-covered forest floor. He fumbled for the knife in his pocket, turning on his back to face the way he had come, weapon held at the ready. Except for the sounds of Keith crashing through the brush farther ahead, the woods were eerily silent. Cautiously regaining his feet, Randy turned, only to find a nightmare waiting behind them. The killer's smile was wide and filled with teeth as it grabbed his arm. In an instant, Randy was pinned to the ground, the knife plucked from his hand like a magic trick, its sharp blade held against the soft hollow of his neck.
Please, no!
He started to scream as the metal slid in, inch by agonizing inch, until the sounds were nothing more than wet, sucking moans. And before long, those two were silenced. Keith's breath came in ragged gasps where he hid, trembling behind a fallen log as twilight set and shadows lengthened around him. He couldn't know for sure what had happened to Randy after he tripped, but the gurgling screams that had come after gave him an idea. Straining his senses to detect any sign of pursuit, Keith failed to notice the pale figure stalking through the trees behind him. Like a ghost, the shape flitted ever closer, the gasps and sobs of his prey drawing it onward. At the last moment, Keith turned right as the figure lunged. His scream was cut off as hands of iron wrapped around his neck. Staring into eyes black as death, Keith scrabbled in his pocket for a lighter. As his consciousness drained away, the world in slow motion, he managed to pull it out, desperately trying to ignite the tiny spark. The killer snapped Keith's neck with a dull crack, dropping the lifeless body to the ground. The thing that had been Jeff Woods stared at it transfixed, until even its own pale form was lost amid the gathering darkness. Later, Margaret's eyes opened when she lay next to her husband. Something had caused her to wake at 2 a.m, though truth be told, she had been sleeping very lightly lately. Moving quietly to avoid disturbing Peter, She swung her legs over the side of the bed and drew a robe around herself. That day at the party, she and the other parents were alerted to the emergency by Billy's panicked pleading. When Peter and Bob Randall initially found the motionless forms of the boys who had taken Jeff, she had been terrified he was dead too. But they never found a body. For more than 2 months, she had barely slept, frantic she would somehow miss the call that would give her the barest shred of hope of finding her boy. Now, something had woken her. She slipped down the hall and paused briefly to check on Lou. Her younger son snored in his bed, dead to the world. Once Billy had come forward to support Jeff and Lou's side of the event surrounding the bus stop fight, it hadn't taken long to remove Lou from the tender care of the juvenile detention facility. Margaret knew she would be happier he was home, that it wasn't fair to him to be so depressed. But any joy she felt was lost in the void left by her missing child. She and Peter had treated Jeff so coldly lately, she only hoped she would get the chance to tell him she was sorry. She paused outside Jeff's door, considering whether to proceed for a moment, before pushing her way inside. The room appeared untouched, the bed unmade, half-opened cardboard boxes remaining where they had since the family moved in. Margaret, Peter, and Lou weren't the only ones interested in finding Jeff. The police hoped to question him regarding the deaths of the 3 boys, since Jeff was the last person anyone had seen them alive with. Margaret knew they were considering Jeff as a suspect, but the victims had been ripped apart. The savage nature of the attacks practically incapable of being administered by a human, let alone a teenage boy. Margaret prayed that the boys had simply been victims of some psychotic killer. As terrible as that would be, it scared her to think of the police accusing Jeffrey of the crimes. It terrified her to consider they might be right. She was about to leave when a faint whisper of autumn breeze caused the curtains to gently flutter. The window was open. Moving across the room, she firmly closed it and threw the latch. She considered for a moment. She was sure it had been shut before she'd gone to bed. A noise from back down the hall startled her, drawing her attention away from pondering. Cautiously creeping back the way she came, more faint noises soon let her identify that they were coming from the bathroom. She stuck her head into the bedroom and hissed her husband's name, receiving no response. Not wanting to alert the potential intruder by calling louder, she instead reached around the doorframe to the corner where Peter had propped an old baseball hat, the feel of the hard wood in her hand granting her just enough courage to carry on. Pulse pounding, Margaret edged ever closer to the bathroom, bat clutched in one hand and the other before her, until it at last rested on the door. Heart in her throat, she threw it open and flicked on the light. Her mind whirled as it took in the scene that greeted her. It was a moment before she realized that the figure curled on the bathroom floor clutching a knife was her son. He was almost unrecognizable, save for the skin of his face, still glaringly white as ever. From some far mental way off, she dimly knew she recognized the dark wig covering his head. Katie, she thought. That poor girl. Her gorge rose as she realized Jeff had used the knife on himself, cutting upward to the corners of his lips to extend his mouth into a grotesque, unnatural smile. Blood continued to run down his cheeks, soaking the now stained white sweatshirt he wore. Jeff raised his face to look at his mother. In horror, she saw his eyes were pitch black. She said she wanted me to smile more, but I couldn't keep smiling. It hurt after a while. Now, though, I can smile forever. Margaret's mouth dropped open in shock as Jeff grinned, baring his teeth. What's wrong, Mommy? She says I'm beautiful. Aren't I beautiful? Seemingly without moving, the killer was on his feet and had closed the distance to his mother. In one motion, he thrust the knife between her ribs. Margaret made a soft sound of pain and dropped the bat, grasping weakly at the hand holding the knife in her side.
You said she was gone forever, Mommy, but you lied. She's still here with me. She showed me the truth. There's no pain here, no bullies, no anything. Just floating in the deep, dark water. But people are scared to make the choice. They aren't brave like her, so I'll help them choose. The knife was pulled out. Bright gouts of blood poured from Margaret's side as she fell to the floor gasping. I'll help Daddy, and Lou, and Billy and his parents. I'll help everyone. She was right. There's only one choice, and everyone has to make it eventually. I'm just speeding things along. Margaret raised her hand, eyes pleading in protest, wanting to tell her son she still loved him, that she was sorry for everything that had happened. Jeff, the killer, raised a single finger to his torn, bleeding lips. It's okay, Mommy. It's okay. Shh. He smiled. Just go to sleep. Forgive this blasted handwriting, Doris, but you must attribute the chicken scratch to my dire and dreadful situation, and to the fact that I'm a doctor. Had any of my other memos been written such as this one by my own hand, you'd have seen that, while sloppy, my penmanship under the conditions I found myself in is of far more frantic caliber. Please know that despite this, and despite whatever it is I'm about to scribble, that this is Daniel. This is Dr. Jacobson who is writing this, and that I have not gone mad. Of course, that's entirely what a madman would say, I suppose. But I hope that, given my level of vocabulary here, and our years of both professional and personal confidence in one another, that you might believe me now, because this account is most certainly unbelievable. Before I go back to the beginning, Doris, and explain to you why you must do what I ask of you, as preposterous as it may seem, I must first skip to the end with a request that may be as dire to you as it is for me. That if I do not return to the office today by 5 in the afternoon, or before whenever the sun begins to set, that you must kill me. By your hand or the authorities, but you have to tell them that I mustn't be shot. Impale me. Burn me. Decapitate me. Just don't shoot. Please, God, just don't shoot. And if you or they must shoot, just don't miss and use silver. Should the police need a reason as to why to use deadly force against me, tell them I'm armed and dangerous. Tell them I'm a loon. Hell, show them this godforsaken note. Officer, I will kill people if you don't kill me, you understand? Their blood will be on your hands, got it? There. That ought to do it. Now, Doris, should I go missing, should you never see me again, in my absence, I want you to offer my position as senior dentist to Marcus Maelstrom, my associate. In his place, then, the new intern, Seth, will be his. Tyra will remain as our hygienist, and you, Doris, will promptly give yourself a raise as our secretary, however you see fit, given all this trouble. I entrust you with this, and the deed to the building, should you or Marcus need it, is behind the picture of me smiling sloth in my office. I think that covers everything in the end. Now, on to the beginning, which happened yesterday.
As you'll recall, it was November the 1st, one of the busiest times of year in our profession, it seems. Be it due to the impending holiday season, family photos as early as Thanksgiving, or the last-minute usage of insurance benefits before the proverbial calendar folds shut. Most importantly, in the case of this story I'm relaying to you, it was the day following Halloween, when every worrisome mother or helicopter father rings your desk, as I'm sure you're already well aware, to get all of the so-called sugary gunk out of their children's mouths, after letting them be filled with dum-dums, candy corn, peanut butter cups, and every other vehicle for high fructose corn syrup on the market all in the span of 4 hours. Suffice it to say, Doris, I hate Halloween, but also love it. Professionally, it makes an ugly mess of the otherwise top-notch services we provide to our community. However, personally, and perhaps more so selfishly, it makes all of us a quick buck after an otherwise slow season, following the August back-to-school rush and the homecoming push of mid-September. If that was a lot of superfluous or otherwise rhetorical information, then forgive me. My mind is quicker than my hand can even write this, and I suppose that's because all of it is rather fresh after my little chat with little Robbie Beekman. Do you remember the Beekmans? Surely you must. Perfectly quaint little family of 4, Robert and Karen, Daisy and Robert Jr., whom I was introduced to simply as Robbie. You might recall the Christmas card pinned up in my office, the one sent with the box of a dozen candy canes some 2 years ago. If so, well, that is the Beekman family and their youngest. Little Robert Jr. was here as of yesterday afternoon. Listen, or rather read this carefully now. I want you to go into my office and grab that very card. Take a good look at it, and at that little boy. Look at his face, look into his eyes. You may very well see that face again, but those eyes are long gone. Lost to something downright hellish, if I'm right about this thing. Therefore, this is the part that'll be most difficult for you, as both a grandmother and as a human being, I know. If you see that boy after dusk today, or any day, just as you'd see me, you must kill him. You understand? You must kill the boy, Doris. Don't let him live. And know that it isn't a little boy you're killing at all. It isn't. Know that well. In fact, you'd be doing a damned public service, pardon my French. Even if you don't believe me, which I'm sure you don't, at least humor the man whom you've known for the last decade and who signed every last one of your paychecks. A man you probably assume has gone absolutely batty, and justifiably so. Maybe you think the late hours we spent laboring meticulously about the office have finally gotten to me? Or that maybe my recent divorce from Jane has pushed me over the edge? Know that neither of these is the case. As for the former, well, you've seen me day in and day out. You can attest firsthand to my sanity, my punctuality, my professionalism. For the latter, well, you can call Jane, by all means. You probably know her number by heart. But if not, it's in the Rolodex. And you can ask her to defend my character. Though, yes, admittedly, the separation has been hard on us both. Neither of us has been nasty to the other in any conceivable way. If not for our own sakes, then for the sake of little Vincent. Though I assure you there's no bad blood between us, even if we hadn't conceived a child together. Children, yes, yes. We must think of the children. Now more than ever. I suppose for their sakes I've wasted far too much time already. All right. Allow me to get on with the story. Robbie Beekman arrived yesterday sometime before 9 in the morning. I was just finishing up with the patient. It must have been Mrs. Lancaster, the woman with the far too white dentures, when Seth informed me that a young boy was waiting in the lobby for me. You must remember that Seth, bless his heart, is still developing those fine-tuned privacy and security skills you've all too well acclimated to over your many years of service. Even so, I cut the young man slack, given the rather bizarre circumstances of the boy's visit. According to Seth, Robbie arrived alone. It's hard enough to spot anyone under the age of 12 in the toy aisle of a department store all by themselves, let alone in a medical office such as ours. So, when I was all finished up with Mrs. Lancaster, I telephoned Seth to let the boy back and then asked him, "Good morning, Robbie. Where are your folks?" I said, and the boy nodded shyly. "At work," the boy said. He said this with a considerable lisp, despite the fact that I had no recollection of performing any wire work inside the boy's mouth. Nor did I refer his parents to any sort of orthodontist who specialized in braces. It then dawned on me, as it should have from the moment I realized you were behind the front desk, Doris, that it was Friday per the child's statement. "Oh," I chuckled, somewhat nervously as I began to grasp the situation. "I must admit, Mr. Beekman, there are certainly better ways to play hooky." "I'm not playing hooky," the boy said to me. "Oh, is that so? Well then, what brings you by, son?" At this point, the boy opened his mouth with an accompanying "ah," as is often my direction when doing so. There appeared to be something, even at the distance from my desk to the doorway, coating the boy's teeth. Some foreign object, perhaps, or some kind of substance. Something slightly opaque with a light greenish tint. I asked him to step a bit closer. He did, and then explained it to me as I started to figure it out myself. "They're vampire teeth, and they're stuck." "Stuck?" I asked a bit excitedly. The boy nodded with hard swings of his neck to the point where I thought he might harm himself. "Well," I thought and glanced at my watch, realizing I didn't have another appointment for a good half hour. "Why don't you take a seat and I'll have a closer look?" The boy did just as I asked without another lispy word. I grabbed for my spectacles in their usual perching spot upon my desk, and then realized they were dangling from around my neck, bouncing softly on my tie. I slipped them onto my face, grabbed my stool, and scooted up to the child as he settled back beneath the overhanging lamp. I went for its switch, and he stopped me. "Dr. Jacobson?" "Yes, Robert." He swallowed before continuing. I remember that because it was very pronounced. "Could you not turn the light on?" I chuckled nervously once more. "Might be a bit hard to see, son." "I know, but it'll hurt my eyes." I grinned, as you once called it my signature warm reassurance, and rolled back on the stool until I hit the edge of my desk with my hip. The shades had been sitting in there for so long that I didn't even need to feel around for them in the drawer. "Well, you're in luck, sport," I said in that real way-to-go champ sort of way. "Now, I admit these probably aren't what the kids these days call cool," I said, handing him over the black shaded goggles, which, as you know, nearly double as a welding mask. "But you strike me as a trendsetter." The boy didn't laugh. They never do. Usually that joke gives the parents a slight chuckle at least, and for a split second, I expected it from over my shoulder. But that day I was without the typical peanut gallery. The boy took the glasses apprehensively, then said,
It'll still hurt my face, though.
Your face? I clarified. The boy nodded. Had my chair had a back to it, I would have certainly sunk right in. Perhaps the boy had a sunburn, I thought, even though his skin looked fairer than my own, and I only could go outside to fetch the mail. Or maybe he had some kind of disease or hypersensitivity, though I don't recall it from any of our previous appointments. I say all of this to say, Doris, that when confronted with the strange or bizarre, we tend to do everything we can to rationalize it, to explain it away. Otherwise, we must dare to confront a horrible truth about ourselves. That, deep down, we can so easily be swayed to utter madness. Well, I said, folding as one might do in a game of cards. I suppose I can see enough.
They are glow in the dark,
the boy said, and he was right. The little chompers inside of his mouth were glowing, albeit only slightly, as cheap plastic toys of the same gimmick often do. I chuckled slightly. Did your cape glow in the dark too? The boy shook his head. Well, I guess even Count Dracula needs a nightlight, huh? The boy's face stretched in confusion.
I went as Batman.
At the time, the irony went straight over my head. Batman? Robbie nodded and tried not to gag as the saliva must have accumulated in his mouth. I nodded apologetically, switched on the ejector, and sucked out the excess before he nearly gagged again. The child then slurped once, licked the greenish plastic-like coating across his teeth, and thanked me. Afterward, I set the suction device down, retrieved a mouth mirror, and pulled myself once more closer to little Robbie with my glasses now at the tip of my nose. It was sweating despite the cool autumn breeze that glided past the open window. The teeth weren't a part of your costume, then? As I asked this, the boy opened his mouth and I gently lowered the mirror into it. Simultaneously, my tie, which hadn't been clipped on account of the x-ray I'd taken of Mrs. Lancaster's osseointegration that morning, dangled just below the boy's chin and began to tickle him. He giggled a little before I hoisted it over my shoulder and resumed the inspection.
Uh-huh,
he mumbled, the rounded corners of his smile straightening, and shook his head slightly from side to side. Sure enough, the mirror only confirmed my surface-level suspicions. The object appeared to be nothing more than your standard glow-in-the-dark vampire teeth sold at every 5 and dime from here to Timbuktu. Instinctively, I went for my explorer. So, where are they from? I watched as the boy followed the sharp metal object with wide eyes, never blinking.
A house?
I nodded and lowered the instrument into his mouth alongside the mirror in my other hand. Okay, whose house?
I don't know,
he said, sighing that the scary, sharp object was not out of sight and hidden carefully in his mouth. With it, as carefully as I could have under the guidance of this small mirror, I began to lightly prod and pull at the object in an attempt to remove it from the child's teeth and gums. This was a process much harder than it initially seemed, despite my having done so with countless retainers over the years. The plastic vampire teeth were seemingly suctioned onto the boy's jaw. In his own words, stuck. When my initial curiosities about the situation were addressed, though not answered, I found myself now more so curious with the boy's reply. That this otherwise seemingly innocent party favor lodged in his mouth was from a household that he didn't know. What do you mean, son? I asked. He was about to answer when I removed both of my tools from his mouth.
It said, please take one, so I did.
The boy said this in earnest, and immediately my heart bled on behalf of his innocence. Ah, a trick or treat, I then said. Really, I thought, this must have been some kind of trick. I've heard, as I'm sure you have, Doris, of those frightful accounts of tampered candy. Razor blades, poison. I mustn't fill your mind with such images any further, but you get the idea. Never before had I heard of cheap dollar store fangs being such a culprit. Had someone filled them with superglue? God forbid, no, certainly not. Did you have any other treats last night? I continued. I figured the boy had perhaps eaten some sort of chewy, tacky candy, gum or taffy or the like, before fitting the vampire teeth over his own, and subsequently over the sticky residue. Maybe he'd even left them on overnight, crashed from some sort of sugary high and left the concoction to dry. These were, of course, nothing but a series of rapid assumptions on my part. Assumptions that likewise assumed that the Beekmans were neglectful of their youngest at best. Knowing what I knew about their character from our interactions up until that point, this seemed highly unlikely.
A couple picky sticks, chocolate bars, and those little pumpkins,
Robbie answered. My stomach turned as if settling rotten milk. This confirmed my lingering fear. Someone had done this, and probably not to just little Robbie alone. Did you tell your parents about all of this, Robert? The child immediately shook his head.
No, they'd be mad.
I nodded. And that's why you came here instead of school?
Uh-huh.
I nodded again. You took your bike to get here?
Yeah.
And if I asked you to show me the house where you got these teeth, could you? The boy bobbed his head. How would you get there from here on your bike? Robbie thought about this for a quiet moment. I could hear the wind whistle.
I would go down the street.
This way or that way? I asked, pointing in either direction to my left or right.
That way,
he said, confirming the right.
Then I go west and turn west again at the Whittle Park.
I knew where that was. The dog park. It isn't far. Just as the child said, you take a right at 2nd Avenue, a left on Maple, and another left on 13th Street. The park would be difficult to spot this time of year, now doubling as nothing but a flurry of orange and red leaves beside the lake. But otherwise, it's a rather sleepy part of town. That'd bring you to 13th Street, right? The boy shrugged.
I guess.
Then which house is it? He thought again, a bit longer this time than before.
The white one on the left.
With the little porch? Robbie nodded. Just as I feared. The old Schroeder house. That was it, all right. I knew the Schroeders. And maybe you did too, Doris. Nice old couple. Thomas Schroeder was a former client of many years, in fact, and unlike Mrs. Lancaster, had rather naturally colored dentures, probably because the old man was an avid coffee drinker, just like his wife. No one would have ever suspected she'd developed type 2 diabetes, probably because they wrongly assumed that she liked it black like her old man did, as did I. However, I was the first to suspect such a disease, even though I couldn't very well diagnose it myself. Melody had a canker, nothing major. Most folks do. Although typically you'd expect them in a younger mouth like little Robbie's over a woman pushing 75. No. It wasn't the mere presence of the canker sore that concerned me. It was that it hadn't healed in nearly 3 weeks. According to the poor woman who, mind you, had only become my client after such rave reviews from her husband. To make a long story short, which I'm doing an awfully poor job of, I know, Melody Schroeder had to have her right foot amputated on account of poor circulation. The surgery went about as well as it could have, but the house, whose bedroom is on the 2nd story, immediately became problematic. For a good month and a half while the place was up for auction, the Schroeders slept on the sofa upstairs, at least as it was relayed to me by other residents of 13th and Maple. Then, when the auction ended and the house still hadn't sold, they upped and left. Where they went, I can't say, but there's reason to believe they moved in with friends while the realtor continued with home showings. I believe her name was Erica something, but as of a few weeks ago, the for sale sign in front of the home up and vanished, so there's no way for anyone to verify that. Suffice it to say, Doris, that house is vacant, meaning there's no way little Robbie could have gotten anything from it at all. Unless, of course, the boy's lying. Or unless there's squatters inside. You may rightfully ask yourself, though, if that were the case, why on earth would a squatter, who by their very nature, dwelling within a home still in the market, would want to remain as discreet as humanly possible, give out little Halloween trinkets, essentially announcing their presence to an entire neighborhood? Your guess would be as good as mine. Of course, I couldn't outright guess it to the child at the time. Instead, I clarified what he had already told me. You said there were teeth in a bowl on the porch. Uh-huh, he replied, flinging spittle on his chin. I wiped it off with my glove. And a sign read, "Please take one." Right. Did anyone else? Yeah, all my friends did. Good Lord. Did any of them have the same problem? I don't know, I didn't go to school. That's right, I said aloud. That's right, and his teacher will be phoning his parents about it any moment. And they'll be worried to death. And then they'll wonder, if the boy was with you, why didn't you call them immediately? Why didn't you call us, Dr. Jacobson? Because what was I supposed to say, Doris? That their child was inflicted with a bad case of sticky vampire teeth, is that what? So, all you need to do is pry them off, I reassured myself. Pry them off and maybe give the boy some anti-cavity toothpaste and send him on his way. So that's what I began to do. I began to pry them off, gently at first. But the more and more I realized my efforts were futile, I started to get aggressive on the jaw, pulling at the dimly glowing teeth with about the same strength I would have had they been a lid on a well-sealed jar. Ah! The boy whimpered. I could see his eyes begin to water. I'm sorry, Robbie, I said, still wedging my explorer between the boy's teeth and the foreign object. This will only hurt for a moment. It's almost off, I lied. Okay, he said. His voice was now shaken. I needed to end this, but I couldn't. The damn thing just wouldn't come off. What's under this thing, grout? I don't even think the towel in my bathroom would hold this much. After a good 2 minutes of tugging and pulling at the boy's expense, I decided to give his mouth a rest as I thought up other ways of unlodging the object from within it. He could tell that I looked nervous, and soon his face began to mirror my own. Is it gonna come off? Yeah, of course, I reassured him. It's just a bit stuck is all. Nothing I haven't seen a dozen times before, Mr. Beekman. That lie was bigger than the first. And as you know, I never lie to my patients, Doris, especially children. Let me look again, I told him, and then used my handheld light to inspect around like searching a pitch-black cave with vaguely green columns. Sure enough, aside from the vampire teeth, there was also a considerable buildup between what I could see of some of Robbie's actual teeth just above his gum line. Someone hasn't been flossing, I thought, and then retrieved my instrument again. Now, Robbie, I said, I'm going to scrape away some of the buildup between your teeth, okay? That way they'll be nice and free from any obstructions, any gunk, and we can get these silly vampire things off of them. Will it hurt? I shook my head with a smile. Not at all, son. The boy nodded and opened his mouth. My first targets were the left lateral incisor and the left canine, 10 and 11, and the plaque building up between them. So much as I could tell, it was probably just foodstuffs and candy, but it couldn't hurt to clear up anyway. As soon as I started, it was immediately apparent that this was a neglected area of the child's mouth. The gums immediately started to bleed, and I could even make out the softest stains of brown tartar. You eat a lot of candy, do you, Robert? The boy shrugged. Only for Halloween, really, and Christmas, and Easter. I was about to continue when I noticed his face scrunch a little in thought. And I guess sometimes after soccer practice. I nodded and appreciated the boy's honesty. Children are often the most transparent clients, for better or for worse. What kind of candy do you have after practice? Usually bubble gum, kind of like yours. Like mine? I asked. Yeah, like when you clean my teeth. Ah, you mean the polish, I said, and the boy nodded. Usually the paste I use is mint-flavored for my adult patients and bubblegum for the kids.
Mm-hmm. What flavor is this one?
This what?
Polish.
No polishing yet, Robbie. Not until I defang you, at least. I watched as the boy's expression tightened and his eyes narrowed.
Then what's the sweet taste?
I aimed the handheld light into the child's mouth and noticed that some of the blood from little Robbie's gums had trickled down onto his tongue. And call me crazy, Doris, but in that moment, a chill shot up my spine as I realized that the boy had begun to salivate because of it. Sure, he might have just had a high blood sugar at the time, but in over 35 years, I've never heard of anyone equating the taste of their own blood with candy.
What's wrong, Dr. Jacobson?
The boy could see that I had probably gone pale white. Nothing at all. I suppose to perhaps behave as casually as I could have given the circumstances, not to cause the child any alarm, I suddenly started to mindlessly pry at the vampire fangs of my explorer like a child picking at their uneaten food with the end of a fork, never minding the fact that it had been a useless endeavor. At least it would have been, had the glowing green teeth not begun to slip off.
Are you okay?
Yes, of course, Robbie, the teeth, I said a bit too excitedly. They're coming off.
Really?
I nodded, my tie dropping to the boy's chest as I did, and traded the handheld light for my mouth mirror, instinctively lowering it beside the explorer as the cheap, plastic-like choppers began to peel away. It was satisfying, Doris. Oh, so satisfying, let me tell you. I had to tilt the mirror back to get a better look. What had I missed? What had held the loathsome things on in the first place? These questions were never answered, mind you, as a new one had abruptly seized me and my tongue, flushing my cheeks and forehead with immediate warmth and panic. How could I see the ceiling in the mirror? Surely the roof of the child's mouth would have been in the way. Yet somehow it was no longer visible, Doris. I swear to you this. Nothing of little Robbie was visible anymore. The child's reflection was simply missing.
Dr. Jacobson, you don't look so good.
It had just been there, hadn't it? How else had I seen the boy's teeth?
You're all red, sir.
You didn't sleep well last night, Dan. Trick-or-treaters kept you up, didn't they? You're just seeing things. You're just... Ugh. The boy suddenly began to gargle. I looked up from his mouth and watched as his eyes began to roll back into his skull, showing nothing but the milky whites. Robert, what's happening? The boy's mouth began to bubble with saliva, and drool overflowed onto his chin and down his neck. I then watched all too closely. The image forever seared into my mind, now as the child's cheeks began to swell like a baby about to vomit. But instead of vomiting, he spat the blood-covered vampire fangs into my face and opened his jaw hideously like that of a snake. And that's when I saw that little Robbie Beekman had fangs of his own.
Red,
I heard him grumble over the thumping of my heart.
You're all red, Dr. Jacobson.
Then I felt the tug, as Robbie gripped the end of my tie with his tiny hand and with great strength pulled me down toward him, his drooling mouth unhinging to a size I never thought would be humanly possible. It wasn't humanly possible. And that's when, for the first time and last time in my adult life, Doris, I slapped a child across the face. Right across the face like you'd see in the movies. Except to my surprise and horror, the boy didn't yell or shout or holler about it, despite the fact that my hand was stinging and surely his cheek must have been too. He merely lay there, stiff as a board, as I stumbled backward towards the door, gripping my metal tools with one jittering hand and fumbling for the cold handle with the other. I then watched as the child slowly sat up, turned his head in my direction, and drooled onto himself. Robert, I'm calling your parents this second, I said, beginning to turn the handle. In hindsight, this was a foolish threat, but the only one I could make in the moment and with any potential consequence to a child of the boy's age. Robbie's eyes rolled forward with a look so intensely penetrating that immediately my head began to throb.
"No, you can't tell them,"
the child screamed. "I can't tell them," I repeated without affect. I still don't know whether or not I had said this of my own accord. I then watched in a paralyzed stupor as little Robbie's eyes rolled back again while he began to approach me. Whether or not he was gliding through the air, I can't seem to remember. But in my mind's eye, it appeared that way. He was advancing at an almost ethereal speed. No, I didn't slap the boy again. As I said, the first time was also my last. Instead, I did something far more effective. Instinctually, as if playing Van Helsing in some old black and white horror show, I raised my instruments into the sign of the cross before me and winced. Little Robbie did too. In fact, he did more than wince. He screeched. It was shrill and painful, and then he brushed past me, pushing open the door and fleeing into the lobby. I heard a handful of shrieks over my shoulder as I got my bearings straight, and then, when I had finally found myself grounded, followed in the boy's direction. But by that time, he was already gone. Seth stood in the open doorway, gripping his frame with both hands and leaning into the hallway. Behind him, the lobby buzzed with murmuring voices. Magazines fluttered on the ground like freshly fallen foliage, and a single chair lay overturned. A small hand suddenly and softly gripped my forearm from behind me. I flinched and spun around on my heel with a gasp. The old woman, whom I immediately recognized as Elma Lutterman, matched my expression with a slight hiccup. "Dr. Jacobson!" she then exclaimed, laughing nervously to herself. That young man just stole my umbrella." I nodded without processing what she had said, although clearly, given this recollection, I did in fact remember it. My mind was still on the boy, you see. His eyes. His fangs. I think I said something absent-mindedly to her, like, "I'll be right with you, Elma," before meandering up to Seth and putting a hand on his shoulder. He shivered under my touch and turned to me, relieved. "What in God's name happened, Seth?" The young man shook his head, mouth open. I don't know. That little creepy kid just stormed through here and took that poor lady's umbrella. I mean, who the hell steals an umbrella, Doc? It's not even raining." Something about the intern's wording caught my attention. "Creepy little kid, Seth? What do you mean?" I agreed that little Robbie Beekman was most certainly creepy, but Seth hadn't been in the room with us to make that assessment for himself. In fact, before that morning, Robert Jr. was completely normal, an unthreatening child. "I mean, did you look at him, Doc? Really look at him? There was something funny in his eyes. Besides, the way he was standing at the door earlier, that was all, I don't know, creepy." "How was he standing at the door?" Seth looked at the entryway and then back at me. "All still and, I don't know, creepy, like I said." "He didn't step in?" The intern shook his head. "Not at first, no. I asked him if he had an appointment and he shook his head. Then I told him to come in and wait while I'd ask you to see him. That was it." "Come on in," I thought. Seth invited him in, just like in the movies. Thank you, Seth," I stuttered, and patted the boy on the shoulder before walking away. Where I was headed, I didn't know. "For what?" I heard him ask in confusion. I didn't answer. Really, I didn't have an answer to give. The rest of the day was more of the same. I guess you could call it coasting by. Not really thinking about much of anything aside from the boy and merely going through the motions of the job. I think I gave poor umbrella-less Elma Lutterman a crown instead of a root canal. Poor Elma Lutterman indeed. When we make it through this thing, Doris, if we make it through this thing, remind me to correct that mistake, would you? I did find her umbrella, you know. It's resting on the Beekman porch, probably right where little Ronnie left it after his folks invited him into his own home. They were probably concerned as to why their own son, who surely had a house key, needed a warm welcome, and one during the middle of the school day, of all things. It was probably Karen, come to think of it. Robert Sr. would have been at the office. She probably pulled her boy inside, and rightfully so, feeling confused as I did one moment, and the next feeling the child's teeth sink into her neck. Daisy would have been next. Then there'd be 3 of them, and even a man as capable and broad-shouldered as Robert Beekman wouldn't be able to ward off 3. 3 of them, Doris. 3 of them right here in our community. They were probably watching me as I drove by, plotting their next move. God knows there's probably more of them. Probably in that empty house. That's why I decided last night, being unable to sleep despite the garlic, cloves, and my mother's crucifix I had brought into bed with me, that morning I'd come to pay a visit to the old Schroeder house. And yes, I'd of course bring garlics and a crucifix along with me. You might think I'm crazy, Doris, but I'm certainly not stupid. Which leads me to the police. Why haven't I called them myself? After all, if I'm as sensible as I claim to be, wouldn't the most sensible thing to do, given this wild situation, be to call the authorities? And tell them what, exactly? What I'd have told the Beekmans? That their son may now very well be a creature of the night on account of some bargain bin plastic fangs? Oh, yes, hello, officer. I'd like for you to drive a stake through a 6th grader's chest, if you'd please. I believe he's a threat to the public health. Even if I told them the truth without all the spooks, that there may very well be squatters camping out in the old Schroeder residence, you more than anyone, given your history as a paralegal, would recognize that the red tape such an endeavor would string up would take so long to cut through that by the time it was all snipped, half the city would already be bloodsuckers. Besides, if my research is correct, which was rather unorthodox to conduct in my profession, there not being any empirical articles written on vampirism after all, any and all vampires ought to be at rest during the daylight hours on soil from their native home or native grave. Superstition is confounding if not vague, ultimately meaning that it should be perfectly safe for me to venture onto the Schroeder property so long as the sun's overhead. I may not even need the garlic or crucifix at all. Perhaps I'll only need a stake. In my search for the truth, which mostly comprised of sifting through cheap tabloid articles, not surprising given the subject matter, I also attempted to determine whether or not anything like this has happened before, perhaps in another town not unlike our own. As you'd expect, there wasn't much in terms of supernaturally charged plastic teeth, which themselves are quite unremarkable, I might add, seeing as I picked them up off the ground out of a puddle of saliva and examined them closely. I found 3 articles about 3 separate accounts of children choking on their respective sets, but I could hardly see anything otherworldly about these accounts. There was, though, a young man who back in the late 80s found a pair of X-ray goggles in his pillowcase and then proceeded to swear that there were skeletons walking down the street hours later, despite having only worn the glasses for 20 minutes. This was, of course, a story from the page of Downtown Tattletale, and as such, should also be taken with a grain of salt. Similarly, there are countless so-called eyewitness testimonies surrounding deadly Halloween candies, not filled with glass or razor blades, but rather a sort of supernatural paranormal power. But I digress. Given the task set before me, perhaps these many words of mine, scribbled on these pages, were but a way for me to delay the inevitable. Now I can delay it no more. If you've reached the end of this memo without disregarding it entirely, Doris, then I thank you. My long hand truly is as much, I suppose. Do know that right after my consideration of calling the police, I considered calling you. However, it was dead of night at the time, and I didn't wish to disturb you. I suppose by now I regrettably have, though, haven't I? Give Jane and Vincent my love, would you? Yours truly, Dan. Hey everybody, Kevin here from Nightmares Nightly. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening. I also have a little bit of a thing I'd like to share with y'all. So, I don't know exactly what's even going on, but the channel has just, tumbled in the past month and a half. Going from, 3 to 8,000 views per video to, 1,500 views a video. I tried uploading a little more this month, a little more than often, but I've had to go back to work, working, 40, 50 hours a week, and also putting 20, 25 hours a week into the channel. The discoverability has just completely plummeted for some reason. So if y'all could just do me a favor, leave a like on the video, give me a comment, it helps boost in the algorithm, hit that notification bell, and please, one of the best ways for a channel to grow is word of mouth. So if you like creepypastas, horror stories, anything on this channel, if you have someone that likes that stuff, send them what you think they'd be interested in on the channel. Find a video that you think they'd like, and send that to them and tell them to give it a listen. I would more than appreciate it. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody. I try to live my life without too many regrets. I've had highs and lows like everyone else, sure, but I do what I can not to worry too much about what could have happened if I'd have made a different choice. If I maybe hadn't taken the road less traveled. I figure everyone makes the best decisions they can with the information they have available to them at the time. Going through all the what-ifs is ridiculous, because the only way you would have made a different choice is if you had some other detail, which of course you didn't. Hindsight is perfect, and even then, you can never be sure exactly what the sequence of events might have looked like if you've gone right instead of left. And yet, there is one choice I made, one road I took, that I just can't help but wonder how things might have turned out if I'd only done something different. My job has me move around pretty regularly. I'm not going to get into what I do. It has no bearing on the story. But a couple years ago, I was working in Philadelphia and living on the other side of the Delaware River in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm originally from northwestern Pennsylvania, and since this was the closest I'd been to home since I moved out to college, I took the chance to go see my parents whenever I could. I knew I'd be moving again before long, and my folks weren't getting any younger, so I tried to find a weekend every month or so to make the 7-hour trip to visit them. If I'd been thinking about it when I was looking for places to rent, I'd have probably tried to live on the west side of Philadelphia instead of in Jersey to avoid the traffic during rush hour, but by the time I realized it, the lease was signed and there wasn't much I could do. The drive to my hometown was pretty boring, honestly. I'd take the Ben Franklin Bridge across the river, head up I-476 for an hour or so, then embark on a long slog across basically the entire expanse of PA on I-80, before another hour north on I-79 to Erie, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. The only variance in the drive was how long it would take me to get through Philly, because once I got on the 476 extension, I could typically predict my ETA within 5 or 10 minutes. For my second summer in Jersey, I'd taken 2 weeks off and planned on spending the second week in Erie. Things changed that first Wednesday, though, because a big storm blew through and knocked out power in a good part of the area where I was living. Dealing with 90-degree heat with no air conditioning wasn't something I particularly felt like spending the first half of my vacation doing, so after one uncomfortably sweaty night, I let my parents know I'd be heading over a few days early. In retrospect, I should have left first thing in the morning. But because I had a couple things to take care of before heading out, by the time I finally got on that road that Thursday, it was past lunchtime and getting on toward mid-afternoon. For whatever reason, the traffic in Philly was particularly heavy, and by the time I finally got through town, I was a good hour behind schedule. Still, based on my normal timeline, I figured I'd still be able to make it in early enough to grab a dinner and beer with my dad and brother before cashing in for the night. Two things I hadn't taken into consideration were the number of other folks that apparently had the same idea to get out of town that I did, and the road construction that must have sprung up in the time since my last trip home. The interstate highway system is a heck of a thing. Being able to zip along at 65, 70, or in some remote places like West Texas even faster, makes cross-country automobile travel take a fraction of the hours it would otherwise.
I can't tell you the number of times my folks have reminisced about the days before the interstate, when going to see friends outside of DC would take almost twice as long as it does now. What's truly remarkable to me, though, is that even though the entire system of highways was built start to finish in a mere 35 years, it sure seems like when parts of it go under construction, they stay that way forever. Traffic was uncharacteristically heavy but moving. I was making decent time until I saw the first orange warning signs, letting me know that our 4 lanes were reducing to 3, and then to 2, and then to 1. Hundreds of cones stretched down the road as far as the eye could see, and see I certainly could as the cars in front of me reached a complete and total standstill. It was one of the worst deadlocks I'd ever been in. Seriously, I think I moved a mile in an hour. And after about 3 hours, my stomach started grumbling. With an exit just ahead, and no end to the traffic jam in sight, I got off and found a diner to grab some dinner. Even if traffic miraculously picked up, I still had a solid 5 hours of driving ahead of me, so at that point, I knew for sure it was going to be pretty late that I was getting in. After finishing eating, I got back on the road. Things looked like they were picking up for a couple of miles, but then I came to the back of the jam and was right back to waiting. We were moving a little bit better, I think averaging about 5 miles an hour at this point. But as the sun started edging toward the horizon, I pulled out my phone and started to see if Google Maps could clue me in on any kind of workaround. It's a funny thing about human nature. Most of us don't like to sit still. And studies at airports have shown that people would rather walk farther to baggage claim to get their luggage, even if the total time would have been less if they'd have a slightly longer wait at planeside. Well, the power of the internet appeared to be in my favor. Though I-80 still showed as a dark red band for another 50 miles or so, there was a southbound county road coming up in just a few miles, and a northbound a couple after that, either of which looked like they'd let me bypass the worst of the traffic. Since I'd spent the better part of the day sitting on the road, my patience was about worn out. I opted to take the southbound road, even though the app told me it would ultimately take about 30 minutes longer to get to my parents' house. I just wanted to get moving again, and reasoned that at this rate, it might take me more than the 30-minute difference to get to the northbound route anyway. And that is a choice that will haunt me until the day I die. I made the turnoff and immediately felt my mood improve. The signs alternated, limiting my speed between 35 and 40 miles an hour, but even that seemed like flying compared to the jam I'd spent the last several hours in. The drive was interesting. The road a little twisty, with plenty of elevation changes as it curved up and around the hills of central Pennsylvania. It took me on a general southwest diagonal, but turned and doubled back on itself, enough that for the first 30 minutes or so, I got regular views of the stalled traffic on I-80. Pretty soon after that, though, just about the time that the sun was dipping down beneath a couple hills in my rearview mirror, the road took a long curving track and carried me down and away out of sight of the interstate. Now, something that a lot of people don't realize is how big of a state Pennsylvania is. Sure, there are plenty of bigger ones, but PA is deceptively big, and it is remote and isolated. Hell, the translation of the name means Penn's Woods after all. The Blair Witch Project didn't have to embellish that aspect of the state. The fact that you could head into the woods and walk for dozens of miles in any direction without seeing anything like another human being. It's got a decent number of big cities. Pittsburgh and Philly both have enough of a population to support major sports teams. But away from those centers of development, the Harrisburgs and the Pottsvilles and the Scrantons and what have you, there's a whole lot of nothing. Nothing and trees. And dark and lonely road. Such was the road I was traveling that night, winding through the twists and turns of the Appalachian foothills. I've moved around a lot. Traveled through most of the continental states anyway. I sometimes used to wonder when I'd be driving along a patch of asphalt surrounded by only untamed wilderness, what it must have been like to construct such a road.
What had it been like before men had intruded with our civilization and our machines? What had lived there? I don't wonder anymore. Not since that night when I went left instead of right. The way continued to twist back, forth, up and down, and as I wound deeper into the foothills, the trees grew thicker, branches from either side of the road reaching over and almost touching, forming a natural canopy 20 feet up that blocked out much of my view of the sky and the stars above. I drove with my high beams on, because the idea of streetlights had never entered the minds of whoever built this road. The painted lines were old and not well cared for, and I found myself gradually straddling the faded double yellow partition running down the middle of the two lanes to keep some distance between myself and the trees that increasingly encroached the pavement's edge. I've never been a particularly good navigator. My parents used to say it was because I spent my childhood with my nose pushed into a book during car rides, but I personally just think it's because I'm just bad at it. So, despite there being no possible way I could be lost, as there were no other roads I could have possibly turned onto and gotten off track, I more and more frequently found myself checking my phone to ensure I was still on the right path, which is how I almost ran into the other car. My mind was wandering, thinking about the fact that my signal bars had dropped and remained at 0 for the last 20 minutes, and what possible implications that would mean if I should have some kind of emergency. I raised my eyes back to the road that the Google Maps confirmed for probably the 20th time I was still good on my route choice, and after my brain took a beat to process that what I was rapidly approaching was a vehicle stopped in the middle of the lane, I slammed my foot on the brake. I stopped in time, but not by much, with maybe 5 feet separating my hood from the other car's rear bumper. My heart was pounding in my chest as adrenaline coursed through my body, but my fear quickly gave way to anger. Seriously, what the hell was this guy doing? Not only was he stopped in the middle of the road, but all his lights were off. If I hadn't had my high beams on, there was a good chance I wouldn't have seen him before I was practically on top of him, even if I hadn't been checking my phone. I could feel my pulse beating in the vein on the side of my neck. I'm not somebody particularly prone to road rage, and after a couple quick breaths, I managed to get a hold of myself. Not wanting to outright alarm anyone that might still be in the vehicle, I shifted into reverse and backed up about 20 feet, popping my hazards on. That was when I noticed a few odd things about the stopped car, more than just the fact that the lights were out. Of course, it was halted directly in the middle of the road, but that wasn't unreasonable, since there wasn't any shoulder to speak of that the driver could have moved over to. The strange thing, though, was that all the doors were open, those on the driver's side even crossing over slightly into the oncoming lane. And upon further observation, I saw an item dropped out onto the road by the rear driver's side door, something that appeared to be a child stuffed animal. I considered my options, and after a few seconds decided that I would have to go against my better judgment, keep on my merry way, and head outside to get a better idea of what was going on. I said earlier that my job doesn't have anything to do with this story, which is mostly true, but before you judge my decisions too harshly, it bears mentioning that I've spent some time in the military. An obligation to help people has been drilled into me over the years, and I'd seen enough things while deployed to feel that I could handle myself. And so, I got out of my car but kept it running. I popped the trunk to grab the flashlight I kept there and left my headlights on so I could see what I was doing. I looked up and down the road, hoping to spy signs of other cars approaching, but no luck. Hello? I called up to the other car as I cautiously started my approach, circling around to the left toward the middle of the road so I'd be able to get a look inside before I got too close. Anyone there? No answer. The beams from my headlights helped some, but there was still enough shadow to obscure the car's interior. Shining my flashlight, though, easily determined that no one was inside. I moved closer, stooping down by the rear door to pick up the fallen object off the ground. It was a child's toy, just as I had suspected. A stuffed rabbit with well-worn patches showing signs of frequent love. I frowned. If the folks traveling in the car had hitched a ride with a passerby, they would have taken the rabbit, or the kid would have thrown a conniption. I shut the rear door and moved up to the front. I put my hand on the hood and found it was still warm to the touch. That meant it couldn't have been here terribly long. I slid into the driver's seat to try and figure out if there was some kind of mechanical issue that would have forced the car to stop, and was startled to find a set of keys still dangling from the ignition. Pressing the brake, I turned the key and the engine started right up. The headlights and dome light on the roof springing to life. Fuel, oil, temperature, battery. All the gauges looked good. Not even a check engine light. Curiouser and curiouser. Then I saw the purse in the passenger seat. I picked it up. A normal brown shoulder bag, and briefly rummaged around before finding a wallet inside. Everything appeared to be intact. It had about $40 in cash, a couple of credit cards, a gym membership, and a Sam's Club card. The driver's license named the owner as Mary Walker, a pretty blonde that had just turned 30 the month before. A couple pictures showed Mary in stage poses, sitting on a blanket under a tree, the leaves of which were red and yellow, captured in the thrall of autumn. A huge bearded lumberjack of a man hugged her from behind. A small ponytailed girl with a goofy, over-exaggerated smile on her lap. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, a shiver running down to the base of my spine. Something was wrong with this situation. I put everything back in the purse and returned it to the seat, turned off the car and got out, shutting the driver's door behind me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed 911, holding it over my head to try and get a connection. No luck. Cursing softly, I jammed the red end call button and moved around to the passenger side of the car. I played my flashlight around and noticed that some of the foliage at the edge of the road was bent and trampled, like someone had walked through it. I didn't have enough woodcraft to be able to judge how long ago they might have passed, but even then, I couldn't imagine any scenario for why they would have gone wandering. Shining my light into the woods, the beam only extended maybe 30 feet through the trees before effectively being swallowed by the greedy blackness. Looking at the flattened foliage, at the stuffed rabbit in my hand, then at the dark trees crowding maliciously, my thoughts teetered back and forth between what I should do. I made up my mind. I had been trained to help people. It was hardwired into my system. There was a child somewhere in the woods. I raised my foot to take a step onto the beaten path. That's when a white flicker of movement entered the very edge of my flashlight beam. It was Mary Walker. She was naked and walking stiffly, unnaturally, her arms swaying out of sync with the rest of her body, like a marionette manipulated by an inexperienced puppeteer. "Hello?" her voice called out. "Anyone there?" More shapes came into view behind her, shambling along. Here, the bearded man who must be Mary's husband, there, her little daughter, owner of the well-loved rabbit, both naked, both moving as oddly as their wife and mother. And now I could tell there were more. Many more. Their forms indistinct out of the direct light, but so many. They caused the darkness to pitch and swell with their odd staggering passage, their voices a chorus. "Hello," they called. "Anyone there?" Parroting back the questions I'd asked only a few short minutes ago when I'd approached the abandoned car. I took a stumbling step back, away from the woods and the approaching automatons, tripping into the walker's car. Catching my balance, I involuntarily shone my light up into the pitch recesses of the branches, and in doing so could just make out, barely, a sort of darkness crouched hidden in the upper limits, a void even darker than the trees. Was it my imagination? Those lines of pure blackness that extended from the concealed mass and seemed to pierce the flesh of Mary Walker, her kin, and the countless other shapes moving in concert with them? "Hello? Anyone there?" I sprinted then, back to my car, engine mercifully still running, headlights and hazards flashing welcomingly. "Hello?" I shifted to reverse, miraculously keeping enough of my head to avoid running off the road as I completed a 3-point turn. "Anyone there?
I chanced a glance in my rearview mirror. The pale form of Mary Walker stood halted just at the edge of the forest where the trees met the road. One hand was raised, beckoning me to return, or perhaps waving goodbye, her face a mask of confused sadness. I pressed the gas and drove back the way I came, and I didn't look back again. The rest of the trip was a fog. At some point after I made it back to the interstate, I called my parents, letting them know I wouldn't be getting in until late. I drove on autopilot, the traffic jam having cleared while I was off. I thought about calling 911, but didn't. What would I have told them? And to what end? There was no one left to be helped. I try not to go through life with too many regrets, wondering about what ifs. But this one? This choice? What if I had left earlier in the day? What if I hadn't stopped for dinner? Maybe I still would have gone left. Maybe I would have been there in time to help the walkers. Maybe I would have been taken by that black thing fishing in the dark. What if I had gone right? Would I still be ignorantly going through life, unknowing that there are other things out there? I try not to think of it too often, but every now and then, my thoughts turn to the stuffed rabbit. It wasn't until I reached my parents' house that night that I realized I still had it clutched in my hand. I used to wonder, before men brought our roads and civilization, what was the wilderness like? What lived there? I don't wonder anymore. I can't afford to. At least if I don't want to wake up screaming. And no matter how bad the traffic, I always stick to the interstate. Hey everybody, Kevin here from Nightmares Nightly. Just a quick question for you. What is your favorite series that I've written so far out of these three? The Dealmaker, I Collect Souls for the Devil, or I Hunt Cryptids? Give me a comment down below, and I've written a couple other series too. If you want to throw that in there, if one of those was your favorite, let me know down below so I can really know what to focus on. My favorite thing is the Dealmaker. I don't know about y'all, but give me a shout down below in the comments so I can know what to focus on and what to try to write more of. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody. I was just a boy when I first discovered Fay Hollow. Or perhaps when it discovered me. I came across the path leading to it down from my grandparents' house where I would often visit in the summer months, wild and free from the responsibilities of school. At 10 years of age, whiling the days away in the simple pleasures of fresh air and sunshine, I stumbled upon the strange dirt path running through the forest, somehow sinister and inviting all at once. I recall the particular feeling of dreadful excitement I first had when I found the tree-lined trail, unpaved but well-worn by the passageway of many small feet over a very long time. It curled and swayed this way and that, not appearing to obey any logic or whim, the twists and turns of its passage taking it through the swaths of deep shadow, over fallen trees and across babbling brooks. I had to follow it, of course, even though I knew that there was something darkly magical about the road I trod. I had played in the woods many times before, and though I was not the best natural pathfinder, I knew this trail had somehow never before lay where it now did. Still, a puzzle so mysterious at this, my natural boyish curiosity was simply too powerful for my inherent caution to overcome. I don't know how long I followed the path. Time and reality seemed to enter into a kind of waking dream as I traveled along, and as I continued, the sun gave way to sparkling moonlight visible through the leaf-lined branches of the trees spreading wide above. Stars, foreign and unknown to me, twinkling brightly with strange eldritch light.
Despite the oddity of my journey and the expectant terror that should have beset me from being alone in a place that I was wholly unfamiliar with, all that I felt was a sense of calm and belonging. The barest tinkling silver scraps of music reached my ears as I walked, so faint that they could almost be taken as my imagination, but the strains were so cheerful and inviting that any possible thoughts of discontinuing my journey were rapidly driven from my mind. The farther I got along the path, the closer I got to the music, the quicker my steps became, my feet slapping against the dirt in time with the rapidly increasing beat of my heart as it thundered within my chest. I was forced to pause for a moment when, from the corner of my eye, I spotted a strange glint of moonlight sharply reflect from inside a hollowed-out portion of a tree just off the path. I faltered, unable to decide between continuing on towards the bewitching music or investigating this newly discovered phenomena, before untimely choosing to pursue the latter. Surely the music would wait for me for just a moment. Reaching into the tree, my fingers felt the cold smoothness of carved metal. I retrieved the object from within and found it was sort of a pendant strung upon a leather thong and inlaid in silver, its center stone encircled by an alien but beautiful script that was unknown to me. Most strangely, the gem itself glowed softly, seemingly by means of its own power. As I studied my newfound treasure, I was shocked to discover that my feet, apparently of their own accord, had continued to guide me along the path, again traveling toward the haunting music that still beckoned me onward. Regaining conscious control of my passage, slightly shaken by my auto-ambulation despite the reassuring lilt of the music, I slipped the pendant into my pocket and cautiously proceeded, exhilarant and nervous to discover what might lie at the end of the forest path. At last, the way passed through a hidden wooden archway before entering into a large clearing, perhaps a bit more than a quarter-mile in diameter, that, to my wonder, appeared to be occupied by a fantastic carnival. I continued walking, proceeding down the midway running through the center of the grove. The path lined on either side by colorful booths decorated with garish paints and sparkling lights that offered games of chance and all manner of delightful confections. Dozens of other children ran about me, alone and in packs of 2, 3, or more, all squealing in glee. Each of the individual booths were appealing in their own right. The gaming stands offered great variety from ring tosses to whack-a-mole, and each bore the promise of enormous stuffed animals as prizes, their features so well crafted as to seem wholly lifelike. The food stands advertised the most sumptuous of treats: apples fairly dripping with caramel, blue and pink cotton candy handed out in huge clouds atop paper cones, and foot-long hot dogs piled high with molten cheese and chili. Each of the offerings seemed so incredibly perfect that the thought of choosing one over the other proved overwhelming, so instead, I simply continued to walk along and marvel again at each newly revealed sight. The music that had drawn me along the path continued here unabated, saturating the air but somehow simultaneously coming from nowhere. Reaching the center of the clearing, I found that the midway reached a sort of a hub, with 2 other paths combining to create a Y, dividing the fairgrounds into 3 roughly equal parts. Each of the paths themselves were lined with booths similar to the one I had already traversed, and on further inspection, each section of the fairgrounds played host to a different attraction. In one was a roller coaster, its first a hill taller than the surrounding trees, the train roaring at terrific speeds along the track as the riders screeched in delight. In another rose a great Ferris wheel, lights flickering in sequence along its many arms. And in the final third, directly ahead and serving as a focal point and apex to the entire park, stood an enormous haunted house attraction, its exterior covered with animatronic ghosts and ghouls. The center hub where I was now standing was occupied by 2 distinct features: an enormous fountain topped by a statue of 3 children at play in a ticket booth. I looked at the fountain. Streams of water poured from the statue children's mouths, their lips split into grins so wide that it made me feel slightly uncomfortable. Hundreds of coins lay in the bottom of the fountain, glistening in the moonlight pouring down from above. Looking up, I saw the pale, full moon shine brightly, the upper expanse of sky now devoid of tree branches. I felt for sure that the moon was the closest I had ever seen it, fully 2 or 3 times larger than it had ever been before. The shock I felt when the imposed face, typically called the Man in the Moon, turned and gave me a fully realized wink and grin was only slightly greater than when I realized the celestial body possessed far more feminine features than I could have ever imagined before. Beautiful, isn't she? Don't you agree with me? I jumped in surprise as a piping voice spoke directly behind me. And turning, I found myself confronted with a strange creature, perhaps 2 feet in height. The being was dressed all in green, from its pants and coat to the little hat on its head, and its ears were tapered to points at their ends. All told, it resembled nothing so much as a classic elf from the fairy tales my grandparents would read to me before I fell asleep every night. Yes, she certainly is, I replied politely, taught through route practice and the switch that one should always behave properly when confronted with its new acquaintances. I'm Trevor. Please, sir, could you tell me where I am? I reached down, offering my hand to shake. The creature giggled but did not move to take my hand. Oh, so polite, calling Binkle sir. But that's not necessary, no my word. Why is Master Trevor not having his fun as that in Fay Hollow is what all children have done. Fay Hollow? Is that the name of this place? The strangely speaking thing called Binkle nodded animatedly. Yes, Fay Hollow is where all the children come for fun, and when it's done, they're off to run. Now get your tickets, Master Trevor, so you can have fun too. Hurry now, before the night is through. The diminutive creature turned and skipped off down the path to the left. I stood bemused, unsure of how to proceed. I turned my attention to the ticket booth, its exterior striped with inviting bands of red and white, the window manned by another being that could have been Binkle's twin. I approached the counter and began to rummage in my pockets. I'd like some tickets, please, sir. I'm afraid, as I hadn't been intending on coming to your fair, I don't have much money on me. Oh, never fear, Master Trevor, dear. Tickets here for children are free. Have as many as you please. The little being held out a handful of red and purple poll tickets towards me. With my left hand, I reached to take the offered slips, but in the moment before my finger would have touched them, my other hand, still in my pocket, brushed the amulet I had discovered in the hollow tree along the path just minutes ago. With that contact, I received the biggest shock of the evening thus far, as a sort of wave shimmered across the entire tableau of the fairgrounds. In a fog, it seemed to dissipate itself from my very eyes. I flinched, a knot of dread instantaneously forming itself in the center of my gut. The red and white striped ticket stain was gone, instead replaced by a blocky, 8-foot-tall creature like living stone. The window, as I had seen it, was now revealed to be the cavernous mouth of the creature, its upper and lower ridges lined with sharp-looking teeth encrusted with flakes of dark reddish-brown. A slimily dripping tongue dripped with tiny, yellow spines, exuding and oozing green mucus, occupying the very space that the elf had been offering my tickets. The fountain behind it was still there, but the smiling children upon it I had seen as statues were instead corpses. The liquid springing from their mouths not clear water, but the red scarlet of fresh blood. The silvery music that had drawn me to the grove was also still present, but instead of a whimsical, inviting tune, it was a screeching cacophony sounding nothing so much as fingernails scratched along a chalkboard. Stumbling back, the hand in my pocket lost contact with the pendant, and instantly the booth, fountain, and music illusion snapped back into place, the elf in the window still smiling saccharine sweet as it reached towards me, arms still extended. I fumbled to try to make words in my mouth when my tongue felt swollen and unwieldy behind my lips. At last, I managed to gasp out,
I think I'll look around a bit before I get my tickets, sir. I don't want to, rush into things." With an incredible effort of will, I turned back the way I came, terrified that the thing might decide to simply reach out and snatch me with that horrific prehensile appendage and pull me bodily into its disgusting maw, but not wanting it to see the tears that had sprung to my eyes had begun to slide down my cheeks. As slowly, and with as much control as I was able, I retraced my path down the midway in the direction I had entered, moving one shaky step after another back towards the entrance to the fairgrounds. A terrible thought crossed my mind, and after a moment's deliberation, I hesitatingly gripped the amulet in my pocket once more. Again, the illusion fell away, and to my growing panic, I realized that it was not merely the ticket booth that had hid a darker and more horrific countenance, but rather the entire landscape and its occupants that were camouflaged behind a glamour of childish beauty. The midway booths alone were enough to give me nightmares for the rest of my life. My cleared perception now saw them as they were. Still games and eateries, to be sure, but nothing so innocently joyous as to what I had seen. The dart toss had a boy pinned to the wall, each projectile impacting with a sickening thud and a scream of pain from the tortured target. Similarly, at the whack-a-mole station, children giggling and wielding sledgehammers pounding away at bloodied and broken heads that raised and lowered, so disfigured as to be almost unrecognizable. The stands offering refreshments were just as awful. The candy apples were, in reality, human hands and feet impaled on sticks, and my stomach lurched in disgust as two younger children walked by me, unwittingly devouring their ungodly treats, blood smearing their lips and dribbling down their chins. The various fair patrons were not merely the unknowing perpetrators of the horrors, but far to the contrary. The cotton candy appeared to actually be some sort of amorphous jelly that, once taken in hand by its unknowing victims, slowly and inevitably crawled up their arms, surrounding their heads, and began to eat. I saw perhaps 20 children, their heads engulfed by the insatiable blobs, wandering aimlessly, their skin, and in some cases parts of their skulls, simply dissolved away. The hot dogs were strange. Wriggling worms that slipped themselves into the children's mouths and with a sickening, convulsing motion, proceeded to force their way down their throats. Several bodies lying about, large open wounds still bleeding from their exploded stomachs, told me what happened next. And these were not the worst. No. That distinction belonged to the three main attractions. The general contour of the roller coaster remained the same, but now with the illusion lifted, it became obvious that it was in fact a large serpentine beast, its snake-like body rising and curling about in the same path that the train had appeared to take. Its massive head lay at the entrance, and I watched as a line of waiting riders walked willingly into its open mouth. They appeared to be chatting excitedly, until, with the 10th individual passing into that horrifying void, the maw clashed shut. After a couple long moments, 10 twitching lumps quieted, then began to pass through the creature like a constrictor digesting its prey. The jaws opened again, and the next 10 passed inside. My petrified attention turned to the Ferris wheel, which had been revealed by the amulet as a massive spider web stretched among the trees. Again, docile children stood and waited their turn as, one by one, they were scooped up by giant arachnids the size of ponies, rapidly enwebbed, and hung upside down upon the many spokes of the silken construct. At the center of the web rested a massive spider, easily 10 times as large as the others. Periodically, the smaller creatures would retrieve one of the thrashing capsules and deposit it in front of what must be the queen, her front legs quickly positioning the captive.
A flash of fangs the size of railroad spikes would pierce the prey, the paralyzing venom holding it still for her to subsequently devour the hopefully unknowing victim. The haunted house was perhaps the most horrific of all. A stage was set before the structure, which I now saw was built entirely of human bones of all shapes and sizes. Upon the stage sat a throne similarly constructed, and upon it rested a creature of sylvan and utterly inhuman nature. Though the creature was unquestionably male based on the enormous, flaccid member laying between its legs, its features were distinctly feminine. Curled ram horns sprouting from either side of a head whose softly lined face was dominated by large almond-shaped eyes, black as a moonless night. Around the stage rose a number of sharpened stakes, perhaps 10 feet tall, and affixed atop each was a child, still very much alive. The being on the throne exuded an air of almost casual boredom, and with a motion of easy indifference, extended a hand holding a golden chalice, allowing it to be filled by the blood oozing from one of the impaled children, before taking the unholy beverage to its lips and drinking deeply. A wash of sickly crimson bathing its mouth, the creature wiped away the residue with the back of its hand, drying it upon the thickly matted hair sprouting from its chest. Its dark eyes flicked to me where I stood staring, and it smiled knowingly at me and winked. The idiosyncrasies of the motion a perfect copy of the expression the animated moon had given to me earlier. I don't know how long I had been standing there, desperately trying to move, but too terrified to even twitch. The warmth of urine running down my leg after my bladder involuntarily emptied itself, and a voice again addressed me from behind. "Beautiful, isn't she? Don't you agree with me?" Through an intense effort of will, I turned. The humanoid being was more than 10 feet tall and half as wide, white and hairless, its eyeless face split open by a too-wide smile containing perhaps 100 crooked teeth serrated like a shark. Its long arms hung past its knees and terminated in large knuckled hands seemingly big enough to envelop me completely and tipped with wicked-looking claws. I saw that one of the fingers had been run through a small corpse, the body dressed in a recognizable sage green outfit that revealed the identity of the speaker of whom I had earlier made my acquaintance. "She certainly is, Binkle," I somehow managed to reply, my shaking voice barely a whisper. The creature's smile widened even farther, seemingly pleased that I remembered it. "Why, is Master Trevor still not having his fun? Has he not found something that he would like to have done?" No, Binkle, that's not it." My entire body was shaking as I faced the monster in front of me, its hand moving the little green-suited corpse in time with its words. "It's just, I think my grandparents will be worried if I'm gone too long. They didn't know I would be leaving, so I think it's best that I be going home now." "That makes Binkle feel blue, though what you say is likely true. You've taken nothing and thus still pure. Master Trevor can leave, if he is sure." "I'm sure," I squeaked. The creature named Binkle shrugged. "In that case, Master Trevor must be going then." Its blind head cocked, a serpentine tongue dripping with saliva licking its fish-white lips. "Well, have fun when you visit Fay Hollow again." It extended its arm past me in a gesture directing me back towards the entrance to the fairgrounds. On wooden legs I walked, rigid and barely keeping my balance, edging past the monster called Binkle, my hand never leaving the amulet in my pocket. Just as I passed through the wooden archway, I heard a soft, feminine voice call out to me. "Be seeing you, Trevor." I kept walking, strains of the silvery music still echoing in my ears, its siren song haunting my every step. Despite everything I had seen, whatever magic that powered it was potent enough to still make a part of me want to turn back. Just as I had on my trip to reach Fay Hollow, I can't say how long or how far I traveled to get out. Just that at some point the strange eldritch twilight gave way to mundane sunshine, before depositing me in a part of the forest that I recognized. I slowly lurched back to my grandparents' house, wordless and shaken, somehow making it to the front porch before collapsing from exhaustion and fear. I don't remember my grandmother finding me, though I think I remember her scream of fright when she did, and I have a faint recollection of my grandfather taking me up in his strong arms. At that point, I completely lost track of things for a little while. When I finally woke up in the hospital a week later, my parents were there, my grandmother and mother keeping careful vigil over me. After that, it took me quite a while to remember anything that had happened that day at Fay Hollow. I suppose that's what trauma does to you sometimes. When your mind simply isn't capable of coping with something that it's seen. I recovered slowly but surely, and if the adults were frustrated by my inability to tell them anything about what had put me into my catatonic state, that was far outweighed by the relief that I was getting better. That was it for my grandparents' house for the summer, as my mom wanted to keep a careful, more watchful eye on me. I can't rightly say why, but it wasn't until the next year, pulling back on the shorts that I'd been wearing that fateful day, that my hand found the amulet somehow still in the pocket where it had been left, and the memories all came rushing back to me. The hospital stay was shorter that time, only a couple days when I woke up. The doctors thought I must have some kind of epilepsy, though I think that was more because they couldn't figure out what else it could possibly be that was causing my fits. Nevertheless, that second shock must have been enough to inoculate me to the experience, because once I woke up again, I was able to remember everything I'd seen without going back into a coma. Even when I found the amulet on my dresser where my mother had put it. I spent a lot of my free time after that just sitting in my room studying the amulet. I took to wearing it under my shirt at all times. The conclusion I'd reached was that I'd rather see the scary things coming than be surprised when they got there. On weekends, I started going to the library, poring over the books in the New Age and occult section, seeing if I could find anything that would tell me exactly what the pendant was. But I never really found much of anything that I could directly attribute it to. Same with the whole concept of Fay Hollow. Sure, there were plenty of myths and stories about the fairylands, or heck, even some kinds of extra-dimensional hellscapes. But for every similarity one story or another had, there were always many more things that just didn't match up. After a while, I started to question my memory of the events as they'd taken place, but every time I did, my thoughts would rush back to the amulet. I had to have found it someplace. All thoughts of what did or didn't happen went away the next summer at my grandparents' house. It had taken some effort to convince my mom, but I really did want to spend time with them. Besides, despite how scared I was, there was a part of me that wanted to confirm once and for all exactly what I had seen. At first, my grandmother wouldn't let me go out alone, but eventually I got her worn down. Wandering in the woods, it didn't take me walking too long before I came upon that same strangely twisting path I'd found 2 years earlier. It wasn't in the same place as the first time, but the silvery strains of music trying to draw me down and let me know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was the same trail I'd found before. It was terrifying how hard it was for me to resist that cloying temptation, but holding tightly onto the pendant I wore around my neck, I managed to turn and walk home without looking back. That was the last time I voluntarily went walking into the woods. I thought I was free of Fay Hollow. For a while I was right. The first time I realized I might not have gotten away cleanly was when I idly looked out the window of my bedroom in my parents' suburban home, only to find the neighbor's house and yard had been replaced by a thick, old-growth forest with a strangely twisting, unpaved trail running through it. The barest hint of silvery music just reached my ears before I drew the blinds. After that, I had to be careful. Every once in a while, I'd be walking down the sidewalk, and if I let my thoughts wander, would find myself heading down the forest path, the unmistakable lilt of music drawing me ever onwards. The strange eldritch stars and moon shining down on me from between the thick tree branches above. Once I was studying in the library, went back in the stacks to grab a book, and turning to go back to my table, realized I was on the trail to the grove. On another occasion, the music's spell had captured me so thoroughly that I was in sight of the wooden entryway to the fairgrounds before I managed to finally realize what was happening. I can't say the effort to turn away ever really got easier, but it certainly did get more familiar, and the time and distance I had to travel back to wherever I had left, though still unknowable, seemed to somehow shorten every time. The fear was always there, though. That continued for some long years until abruptly when I turned 18 it stopped altogether. I don't rightly know what it is about being a legal adult that did it, or if it would have made a difference if I'd been born in a country where adulthood was considered to be at an earlier or later age. All I do know is that once I hit college, at some point that first semester I realized I'd been walking to the student lounge daydreaming and hadn't ended up wandering on the familiar forest path. At some point, after a lot of deliberation and a lot more second guessing, I finally took off the amulet. I'm in my 30s now. For a long while, I thought that I wouldn't get married. But then I found a woman that I absolutely couldn't dream of living without. I thought for sure that I would never have kids, but she wants them, and there's no way I can deny her that either. But I worry. If I have a child, will the grove come for them? Will they someday find themselves walking along a strangely twisting trail through ancient woods, with a full moon shining down upon them through the creaking branches, the haunting silver music drawing them onwards to the fairgrounds at Fay Hollow? Will the strange creature Binkle greet them the way he did me and invite them to join in the fun? Will the terrible sylvan creature on the throne of bones grin and wink at them knowingly? I still have the amulet. I don't know how it ended up in that tree, and I don't know what providence let me stop and grab it that first day on my way to Fay Hollow. All I know is that it saved my life, maybe my very soul. It sure didn't stop the Hollow from trying to get at me, but at the very least, it let me see the monsters for what they truly were. It will belong to my child once he or she is old enough. I'll tell them my story, although maybe I'll leave out some of the more gruesome parts, at least at first. It's a poor inheritance, to be sure, but it's also a lesson all of us must learn. Monsters exist. At some point, we all have to decide if we will open our eyes to them or stay willfully blind. They'll tempt us, sell us beautiful lies, and ask us to join in their fun. Even if we tell them no, should we go about our days simply floating? We may wake up to realize too late that they've taken us. And if we go too long asleep, we may find we have already been devoured.